Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 223. This is Carl.
This is Josh.
And today we are going to be bringing to you our coverage of the House of Shadow.
Delaque.
That's right. This is all about House Delaque from Necromunda. So if you're not a Necromunda fan, you've made a poor decision because the game is awesome.
Listen anyways.
Adon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, even Adon's going to like this episode, though. I'm putting it out there.
Wow.
He doesn't like the game, but he'll like the coverage.
He'll like the coverage. There's a lot of good lore here. So
yeah, it's really neat.
A couple quick announcements. If you haven't gone to our YouTube channel and watched us live, hello. Please do so. But if that's not your thing, watching this live, which Josh, you want to talk about the visual component?
Yeah, I'd say anything that we're talking about in the show that has a visual component to it, whether it's art, whether it's models, whether it's the elite choice, games played, hobby progress that we've made, there is going to be a visual component on there. So you are getting the full kind of visual immersion with this along with the audio. You also get to see fun facial reactions and Carl laughing with his head, tipped halfway backwards and things like it.
Do I do that? Does the camera look up my nose?
Right up your nose every time.
I just did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same great audio that you love, but it's just an evolution of that. So.
Sure. Yeah. So it's great. Even if you don't really dive into that, you could support us by just going to our YouTube channel and clicking that subscribe button.
Yeah.
I would really appreciate that.
Helping us grow the channel, helping us grow the audience and the community. So the more the merrier.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So next up, we have a Patreon.
We do.
If you are unaware, we have a Patreon. It's kicked off. It's going gangbusters. We spent, as you'll hear in Hobby Progress, some time with our Dark Heresy live play coverage. We've already released the first episode of that. We've released two interviews at this point on our Faces of Influential Faces of 40K series, and the next one's lined up. So the contents, I'm hearing very positive things about it. Love to hear some constructive criticism. I've seen actually two constructive things back, which has been super helpful. So we're going to work on addressing all those things and keep driving forward. I only expect it to get better. So multiple levels there. At the Inquisitor level, you get all those things. It runs you about $10 a month. And of those patrons, I would like to thank specifically Eric Dacus, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, and Alex Dixie, who are two of our lovely patrons that are supporting our Patreon this last month, and we super appreciate it. And so thank you so much, guys.
Thanks to the both of you and everyone else.
Yeah, so this entire episode is a deep dive into House Delaque, or also known as the House of Shadow. For Necromunda. So we'll be going over all of that shortly. But before we do that, let's jump right into Elite Choice. Absolutely. And why don't you go first,
okay.
Josh?
Yeah. So I went with Nick Shepard and his Bigfoot Battle Wagon, which is complete with a rocking ball. And this is a
I just got that.
Yeah.
That was so good.
This is a battle wagon that's converted to, it's essentially a monster truck meets a battle wagon, complete with a death roller in front. It's got speakers and the Goth rocker on the back of this. This is very orc battle wagon meets Mad Max, like Fury Road specifically, with the speaker system in there, the chains. It's a lifted truck. It's got giant wheels, tons of clearance. It's got the roller in front, just amazingly executed, beautiful vision. And I really appreciated how much fun this model brings to it. It is a centerpiece type model to that. That's also a very functional piece, but especially the Goth rocker really clinched it for me. Just that little integration of, you got the speakers system in there, like gotta have the Goth rocker. Good. Just rocking out on the back of this battle wagon.
How do you think he made those speakers?
That's a great question.
Like those are...
they actually look like parts of, not rivets, but...
buttons.
There's a metal button, washer type rivet thing, and it looks like it's inverted.
That's kind of what it looks like, huh?
Yeah. Which, it's really neat.
That's a brilliant use of it. They look fantastic.
Love the chains, love the wire, and the speakers is such a nice touch.
I told you I would have. I picked mine a while ago, and then this came up. This is one of the few times where, well in advance of the show, like I saw something that appealed to me and I picked it. But then later, closer to us recording the episode, this came up, and I thought, oh, I would have picked that. That's a really good.
You know, Jody called out the last time he was on, and that there's kind of that sweet spot that's like 3 days or so before a show goes live, where we've all picked our elite choices already. So
that's why I tried to break that. After he brought that up, I said, I'm gonna make sure those people that posted early get viewed.
Yep.
And so I made a whole point of going back 2 weeks and looking at, but I had chosen mine like a while back. Because. The one I chose was Trevor Bartley's Necrons, and he said new edition, new army, and this is a gorgeous Necron force. I really like the color scheme he has chosen here. They look kind of rusted out.
Kind of grungy, but the contrast with that, with the green just really pops.
Really good. But the other thing I loved about it was how he said that most of these models were rescued from his friendly game store. I guess his friendly local game store has a used bin. And so he rescued them from there, buying them, fixing them, putting them back together. And then these are the results he got from that.
These are awesome. Yeah, incredibly done.
And this just shows there's ways to excel at this hobby and not have to invest at 100% of the price of the hobby.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a Patreon member and you get the discount from Eric Games.
Get the extra discount.
That's a professional segue right there. No, but in all seriousness, like buying used, buying secondhand, things like this. I wish my friendly local game store had
it's a really cool concept too, of just kind of like the trading bargain bin that the store buys, and some of that stuff goes. But like,
I don't know how valuable that is for the store itself, but other than drawing traffic in, right? And then you need to supplement some of those stuff. So I mean, it kind of makes sense. But
I mean, the store's got to be making a profit off that, right? Too. So.
Why would you do it if you weren't?
Yep.
But man, this is a gorgeous army. Like I really like the effect he did on the green weapons as well.
Yeah.
Like I think they look stellar, and I was just like, that was a force I was like, I would love to play against this army.
Yeah.
Unless they were Necrons or Eldar.
Oh, guess what?
What 2 armies do you have, Josh? So yeah, I mean,
Marines right now.
Great stuff. I think it looks fantastic. Yeah. So I think we got 2 great call outs.
Yeah, great call outs. Nicely done, both of you.
Congratulations. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back. We'll jump into hobby progress. All right, and we are back. And once again, Josh, you've made me look bad. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. But as you were saying, you kind of capped.
I don't have nearly as much of this month or this episode compared to the last 2. This is kind of, exactly.
You were finishing off something. So I'll go first. Because I want to hear myself talk. I've been working on Shell's Night Lords a little bit with her. We've been doing some of the black edging over the, I guess called filigree. So I've actually leaped forward accidentally one step over what I should have done. What should have been the next step was starting the airbrushing of the lightning.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna have to go back and redo stuff afterwards.
Because you're doing the Black Templar contrast paint in the recesses, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Like that next step is which will ultimately be gold in color, silver, gold. I don't remember. I have to go take a look. It's gonna be a metallic color, but prior to that, I talked about this last episode. Using that Black Templar contrast paint over it shades in the inner edge enough that you don't have to worry about that. Looking odd or overspilling some of your metallic.
That's the hardest part of the model to reach too.
It's such an easy solution to something.
Just naturally shading it so you don't have to paint it.
Yeah. So I've been doing a bit of that. I did run Dark Heresy for an entire day for the Dark Heresy group
super fun. I really enjoyed that.
I'm glad. And Shell enjoyed it too. And she was she gets a little anxious. So especially new situations. And she'd played D&D but many years ago. And so jumping into it, she was awesome.
Yeah.
I thought she jumped right in. And
supernatural instincts of just like role playing and the situation, and good questions and just good reactions.
She had the funniest line in the first episode too.
She got the best pun in the two of them.
That's right. That's right. So I really enjoyed that. We were talking a bit about that too, as Josh and myself, as well as 13 of our closest friends, are about to go to what we call Geekend. We've rented a house and we go out to this house. We board game all weekend, and Doug Johnson's going to be there from Table War. He's running some small 40K thing, and so we're all bringing 500 points for some grandiose thing he's got going on, some narrative thing, which I'm very much looking forward to. But I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing here, Doug. But we were talking about that and about how exhausting it is running a role-playing game for a long period of time, because somebody had made the suggestion of we should do like a Geekend for a role-playing group where you try to get as far as you can through a campaign. And I said, who's going to be the sucker that's going to GM that?
Yeah.
Because it's mentally taxing. Yeah. Like way more than being a player.
No, absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, that's not going to be me. So we did spend an entire day. I mean, we ran for about an hour, took a break, ran for about an hour, took a break.
Yeah.
Breaking that up into various episodes.
Yeah, 5 or 6 hours of actual playing, and then we were doing behind the scenes, doing the character sheet progression and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was go time.
Yeah. It was fun though.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was very accelerated, but it was fun, and I was feeling stronger and stronger with the rules by the time we got to the end of the day. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll get even better at it. I've also been working with Table War Charities to gather artists to help with prize support for Adepticon. So Table War Charities does, kind of a lucky draw situation where you buy tickets, you can put them in the various tubs and pull out, we pull out a random winner for each of these. Last time at Adepticon, I think we gave away several things, but key among them was a Warhound Titan.
Was the big one, yeah.
That I think, if I remember correctly, Todd had done the initial base work in Caleb's class, and then Caleb finished it up for him for the thing. It looked beautiful.
Great looking Titan.
Yeah. So what I have to do though is thank Patrick Sarto, who has sent us this amazing Grey Knights Nemesis Dread Knight model that he painted up. And he had posted to the group and said, oh, I'd painted this thing up for a charity, and how do I go about doing this? And I was like, have I got the charity for you? Well, it turns out, Patrick has family members that have autism, and the objective of Table War Charities to help families of kids with autism and dealing with schools in the U.S. where it can be kind of difficult. So he finds himself kind of in that situation to the point where we're like, is there something we can do to help? You know, but he says he's got a handle on it at the moment. I hope I'm not sharing too much, Patrick, but I really loved your story. But he sent over this fully painted model, which is just awesome. I love the Bloodthirster axe
and the head. Like really cool attention to detail on that one.
Yeah.
And such a great cause to donate towards.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We have more coming from other painters, including Dave Paints and other members of the IC's community who have, are kind of exemplary painters and have shared their work and effort here. And it'll go a long way towards helping us raise funds to help out kids across the U.S. So thank you very much for all your time. We super appreciate it. And I'll share each of those as they come in, and I love it. I love it. Dave Paints is, listen, I have 2 armies he's painted for me that I paid for him to paint. Sheldar and my Tzeentch
and demons. Yeah.
And they're awesome. So I'm looking forward to it. He's doing a Rabute Gilliman.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
He's gonna send it over. As soon as he sends it over, I'll put pictures of it.
Awesome.
So what did you finish up? Because you were at the kind of tail end of finishing all these things up.
Yeah, so the last couple episodes,
I'm not trying to detract from your progress.
I talked about having most of my things mostly painted, but I had mentioned last episode that the things that I hadn't painted yet, I hadn't yet done the oil wash, I hadn't yet done the basing, and I hadn't yet done the blood effects.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing the oil wash because I wanted to have stuff ready for Geekend, and I also the Master of the Forge I mentioned last episode had been running that Labor Day weekend challenge of getting basically a combat patrol done. So I got my Leviathan combat patrol for Marines completely finished.
God, they look good, dude.
Base painted, oil washed, everything like that. Thanks. They turned out really well. It's a good looking scheme. Like I love the Sharkadons. They're so fun.
Yeah.
Bringing them to life. So while I was wrapping them up, I ended up just doing everything else that I had ready. Like everything was 95% done and just needed basing, needed oil wash, and needed to just be attached. And I have just a few models that need the blood effects on them still, so that'll happen very quickly. I like to do that all as a big batch because it is kind of messy. It's really fun to do when you're actually like making pools of blood and then flicking it on there.
Yeah.
So you can get that like kind of natural splatter effect. So it's good to just set it up and then do it all together because
makes sense.
It makes a mess otherwise. I did finish building my Brutalis Dreadnought, which is the melee kind of Redemptor chastity. And then I got that primed.
Did you say chastity or chastity?
Chastity. Chastisis? Chastis. I don't know. Words.
They are probably pretty chaste.
Yeah. They're Marines. Yeah, so I got both that and the Ballistus Dreadnought, which came in Leviathan. Both of those guys are primed, so they're ready to go. I'll get base coats going on those next. They're coming up quick because they are kind of the few models missing for a lot of my list that I'm making with the Sharkadons right now. And then let's see. Yeah, I just did a giant batch of bases, so I got more bases done that are ready to go for everything else. Just did a little bit of work on the Stern Guard vets, which are getting pretty close to being done. By next episode, hopefully they'll be done, although Geekend might delay that a bit. And then, yeah, I just had a picture of my Primaris pile of everything that's kind of done so far that I've been working for on this army. Which,
it looks amazing.
Which, yeah, not a lot of time, but have a decent amount of progress that's been going in there, and it's coming together well. So
very nice.
I've mostly finishing up all the infantry here, and then I'll get the 2 dreadnoughts, and then I can integrate some of the existing vehicles that I have, like my Land Raider and things like that, to get this army up to full muster strength pretty quick.
Now, you didn't mention any Aldari purchases. Are you expanding on your combat patrol yet?
I will be. Right now, this is actually interesting. Back to when we had Sky on for our 10th edition coverage, is that nothing is in stock right now.
Yeah, of course not.
Partially because Eldar are
so good.
powerful. I think that's part of the issue, but production across the board, like anything that I'm looking to add to that army is
reboxed and
doesn't exist at the moment. So, and I'm in no rush to that. Like I want to get
I saw something come up on the Barter Bucket, which is a Facebook group we're on. And I saw the Eldar stuff come up there, and I saw Wraiths, and I was like, oh, and I was just about to tag you when I saw you had posted, hey, I private messaged you, and those were gone already.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so the Wraith Guard was still around, but they're already painted, and I was like, I had the other.
You don't want that, yeah.
I would. I mean, you could strip them or paint over it, and that's fine. The one thing I really wanted out of that batch was the Night Spinner Fire Prism, because he still had it in box.
Yeah, I knew it.
Somebody else, unfortunately, had already lined up a deal outside of Marketplace for that one, but I saw those going on eBay for like $185 right now.
Holy cow!
I mean,
the used car market.
They are really good,
COVID.
but like, and I'm not going to play this overly competitive. Like, I'm not trying to chase the meta right now. Right. This is a long-term army for me.
So there's no hurry.
So there's no rush for it. So I'm not going to pay eBay scalper prices for anything.
That's ludicrous. Yeah, that's a ludicrous price.
And yeah, Wraith Guard are going for $100+, and like it's just I'm not in that kind of hurry. So
it's like when I was trying to buy a mountain bike during COVID. And remember?
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
You would be like, oh, what about this one? I'd be like, that one's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. And it's gone. Yeah. All right. Well, let's roll into what you played then. What you played over the last couple weeks.
Yeah. So in completing that Combat Patrol Leviathan list for Marines, got the Sharkadon Combat Patrol fully done. Brian Harvey has also been working on the World Eaters Combat Patrol. Yeah. Him being a huge World Eaters player and fan.
He is?
Yes. Yeah. Believe it or not. We got together and we played an actual fully legit Combat Patrol game. So this was Combat Patrol lists, Combat Patrol missions, Combat Patrol rules, Combat Patrol, the secondary missions that you have in addition to that. And this was a really interesting matchup because the Marines Combat Patrol is 12 models. So not a lot of models.
Yeah.
The World Eaters Combat Patrol is 31 models. And 20 of those are Berserkers, so it's not like they're just chump models.
Those are still Marines.
They're still Marines. There's still 2 wound, 3 up save, melee monster Marines. So it was a really interesting matchup.
No Terminators.
He does not have Terminators.
You have Terminators. Yeah.
So his list is, I don't remember it's a Juggernaut Lord.
Okay.
20 Berserkers, 2 units of 10, and then 10 Jackals, which are glass cannon Berserkers, basically. But they're I love those models. They're also they put out good damage. They're just not as survivable because they're toughness 3. They have like a feel no pain save, no armor, but they do work when they hit. So it was interesting just going into it from the Marine standpoint, me being like, okay, you have almost 3 times as many models as I do. Yeah. And I do have 5 Terminators and then 5 guys with flamers and 2 characters. Like, we'll see how it balances out.
Yeah.
And on the points, Brian's guys all essentially have sticky objectives, which, in combat patrol, any battle line units get that by default.
Yeah.
Which is a cool reason to have battle line units. So I didn't have anybody getting sticky objectives. So he could grab objectives and just keep advancing forward. So on the objectives, he took a pretty early lead on the points by just being able to grab objectives and walk away from them as he's trying to advance into my lines. Where I had to spend a stratagem to make one a sticky objective for me so I could leave and come flame things out there. And it was at the end of the day, it was actually a really close game on models. I think at the end of the game, he ended up taking me out. So he tabled me on, it was a pretty quick game because it's a 500-point game, goes quick. I think we played the game in an hour. I think at the end of the game, he had 4, maybe 5 models, and I had lost my last Terminator at that point.
Yeah.
But it was super surprisingly close.
I was gonna say
how
one-sided it
immediately felt. I felt intimidated on the model standpoint just because 20 berserkers is no joke.
So that's an interesting statement you just made, because I remember reading an article way back in White Dwarf where they were talking about Tyranids.
Yeah,
and they were talking about, if once you put out your Tyranid army, if the opponent is thinking, how am I going to kill all that stuff?
Deal with this.
You've already won the psychological battle.
And that I definitely had that exact same feeling of like, oh wow, like, okay, let's see what I can do here. And it was pretty neat to see come to life. So I'm actually going to give Combat Patrol the props there for that being it didn't look like it was going to be a balanced game, but actually played out being pretty close. And me and Brian are both, I'd say, pretty on an equal level. I think
in terms of skill play,
in general, have the closest games of just 40K, Titanicus, whatever that we play. I think he and I have just the closest games in general. And then obviously 2 very experienced players playing Combat Patrol, but still relatively new armies for us in this edition. So we didn't mind stripping that extra layer of rules out there in order to get a bunch of stuff played. And it was a super fun game. So nice. And always good playing with Brian.
I played a 1,000-point game against Travis, who had come up to play in our Dark Heresy game for the day, which I appreciated him doing because it's not a short drive from Southern California to here. It's probably 6 or 7 hour drive at least.
Yeah.
But he came up the day before, and we played a game, 1,000-point full game. So secondary objectives, everything. I think that's the way to go.
That's the way to play.
Now that I'm, versed in the basics of it, that's what I'm doing. So, and actually, I'm ready to play more points.
Go bigger. Yeah. Same. I am too.
Of course, I said, "Oh, great. What are you going to play?" And this is just after you and I had played, and I got my teeth kicked in by your Eldar. And he said, "I'm gonna play Eldari," which I still want to call Eldar. Is it okay if I just call him Eldar?
I'm just calling Eldar.
Yeah. So
I've been playing Eldar since 2nd edition. They're Eldar.
So I was like, to hell with you.
You can just not
I hate you, just don't come.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, no, it's really, I think it'll be a fun list. It's a variety of different stuff. Not like I'm not focused on Wraith units and this, that, and that. Well, I said, whatever. Even if you were, it doesn't matter, Travis. Bring it. I don't really
you'll
care.
play. You'll have fun.
But I changed it up instead. I was like, instead of my 1,000 Suns, I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to try my Tzeentch Demons just to see how they're playing and what I think of them. So I made a 1,000-point list of Tzeentch Demons that included a Lord of Change, 2 squads of Pink Horrors, at least 2 squads, maybe 3. 2 squads of 6 Flamers and a squad of 3 Screamers.
Yeah.
And I think that was it. The points have since shifted, and we'll talk briefly. I want to talk to you also about the balancing document that came out. But the points have since shifted to where I would be over on this by about 80 points. So about 80 points.
Oh, they went up.
Yeah, they went up.
Lord of Change went up?
Lord of Change went up.
Yeah, okay.
Big time. And I'm going to talk about why, because, man, that guy does some damage. And he was the MVP of the entire match. So the match starts out, and Travis has a bunch of a bunch of bikes, so he's very fast. He has a Falcon, I think. I want to say it was a Falcon. And in the Falcon, he had 5 what are the guys with Melta?
Fire Dragons.
Fire Dragons, thank you. He also had a squad of boy, I'm killing it for
what do they do?
Wraith, not Wraith, Warp Spiders. He had Warp Spiders. Yeah. He had, some Guardians, and then he had Dark Reapers. And so he actually did a couple interesting things. One was he set up the Dark Reapers kind of overwatching the whole board, which they have the range to do that. That's cool. Yeah. But he made a statement that I was like, oh yeah, I kind of do that, which was, he said, I don't ever put these guys on an objective, because if they're on an objective, it doubles the reason for somebody to go over there and attack them.
Yeah.
And if they're off the objective, they have to make a choice of, am I going to go try to take this objective, or do I deal with those? And I thought that's a
smart,
that's a very
yeah.
basic point that you just made, that I'm like, that is a really great point. I need to apply that going forward.
Choices.
His Warp Spiders just
they're brutal.
Are super good. I didn't realize they have Torrent and
D6 shots.
They didn't used to.
Torrent,
yeah, they do. Yeah. So they made short work of one of my squad of pink horrors. Like, wiped them off the map.
Did he lose one in the teleport at least?
He lost one in the teleport.
But risk reward.
Then his bikes race over, and he's on objectives, and he's already getting points. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. The one thing I loved saying to him was, he's like, okay, this is AP. I don't care.
Yeah. How do your
don't care.
Did your 4-up rolls?
4-up, whatever.
Do they show up?
4-up.
Yeah. Everything's a 4-up save.
Everything 4-up.
50,
so
50.
How did it do? Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. It has a little bit of legs to it as well, especially the pink horrors. If they don't get wiped out on a 4-up, roll for each model you lose, they could potentially split into 2 blues and then split into individual.
Get brimstones after blues. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't double into brimstones. They just single brimstone off of blue. But it makes them, I think it makes them honestly more resilient without being ridiculously resilient. Yeah. Because it used to be, when Aaron would play those guys, it's like he's working his way through 60 models or something like that. And I'm just like.
And that's a really good unit to hold an objective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, wipes out one, if I recall correctly, I think I had 3 squads of pink horrors. Wipes out one, and I'm like, okay, this is not going well. So I immediately turn and just wipe out the Warp Spiders using my flamers, and the pink horrors firing everything they can at them. And my Lord of Change does a lot of work here. Like, he steps in, he uses like a focused beam on the vehicle, taking like 9 wounds off his vehicle right away. Yeah. Like, he charges into, and the crazy thing is, he has a toughness of 10.
Yep.
And so let's talk a bit about that. What does that mean? That means a las cannon, a strength 9 weapon, still needs a 5 to win.
Yeah.
Like, I did not, in my head, until I saw him doing this on the table, realize, oh my God, strength, toughness 10 is brutal.
Them opening up the box like that with higher strength and higher toughness, and obviously more wounds on a lot of things too, gives them so many more knobs and levers to adjust durability of things, and also killability of weapons. Yeah. It's pretty interesting, and high strength makes a huge difference, which is why something like lethal hits also really matters now. Of like, oh, every 6 you do to hit, auto wounds gets around some of those issues. Yeah, I'm really liking how this edition is balancing.
Yeah, they've made some changes to that though.
Yes, devastating wounds.
Devastating wounds. Yeah. So in the long run, it takes forever for him to bring down the Lord of Change. Yeah, like forever. Yeah. Eventually he takes him down, but at one point I was able to heal him up 3 because of the, what's it called? The area of chaos.
Oh yeah. The confluence, or
I can't remember what it's called. Shadows of Chaos.
Shadows of Chaos. Yeah.
And every time I say it, I'd whisper it. I'd be like, oh, he's in the shadows of chaos. Nice. So a very thematic battle. It was very fun. And it shifted. Like, he was ahead in points at the beginning, but then it shifted, and I started like overmatching him. The Flamers were awesome. That's why their points went up significantly. If I were to,
I've always loved that unit.
To recreate that list now, I have to drop one of the squads of flamers down to 3 flamers.
Okay.
So what I did instead, I'm playing around with 2 different things at that 1,000 point level. Is instead of 2 squads of 6 flamers, do I do 3 squads of 3, or do I do 2 squads of 2 squads of 3 flamers and 2 squads of 6 screamers? Those all add.
Yeah.
In making those adjustments, it all adds out to 1,000.
Do you want to keep 3 units of horrors as your core?
Like, yeah, I think so. I think that's
super
a lot
important. In the horrors, but yeah.
But I think it's like it takes a lot to get rid of them.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to get rid of them.
Were you guys, or were you, I guess you and Traffic could have done it differently. Were you doing the tactical secondaries or the
tactical?
The fixed. Yeah. Okay.
Tactical.
Yeah. I love the way that game.
I quite enjoy it. And so we played through the game. It went, relatively quickly as far as 40K games go. I think we both had a good time. We learned a lot from it. The 1,000 Suns are really, really fun to play. It's still my favorite army. But now having played the Zeech Demons, which I've always just really, I don't know why it resonates with me.
It's always been
I'm rethinking what army do I bring up to the play on tabletop guys.
Oh yeah.
And should I bring 1,000 Suns or should I bring Zeech Demons?
Or a mix.
That's the other thing. If I'm doing 2,000 points, like I could throw some Zeech Demons in there.
500 points of demons with 1,000 Suns.
Maybe I should.
That's a lure to change
that, and drop out the Zangors and use
real demons.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna do a mix.
Yeah, that's also super thematic for both the armies. Either way,
sure.
Yeah, so
for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I'm gonna do a mix. All right, I gotta give this some thought. So yeah. I'll tell you what, it was sort of liberating to just be like, 4 up 6.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Oh well, these are AP -6. Yeah, I don't care. Just like I'm gonna roll. Yep, lost a couple
all day. Yep.
Flamers are just
50% of the time it works every time.
Flamers are still really good. Yeah, really good.
Yep.
They're not the most powerful they've ever been, but they do the work. So
I remember Flamers after that White Dwarf update in 5th edition, or was it 5th or 6th edition?
They were sold out.
They went crazy. Yeah,
it was right after the new models had come out. So So anyway, I absolutely loved playing with Travis, and this was the first game of 40K Travis and I had ever played together.
Oh yeah,
in the years that we've known each other. So it was super fun, and we're gonna have to do it again.
Well, the geographical distance makes it a little tricky for a tabletop in-person game. But
I mean, I think I've only played Ed maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
one of those times I cheated, and then I've played Blake once, maybe twice, twice. Yeah, they hosted something down there once, and then I met Blake up at Frontline Gaming, their old store, and we played a game there, and then I had to run out because I had to go buy my house. Like buying a house, for those who don't know,
that's a good excuse to
the worst. Like, or I was refinancing is what it was. And like, it wasn't going through. And then I get this call and they're like, you need to sign in the next 2 hours. And I'm like an hour and a half away.
Hey, you know what? The great thing that's come out of COVID was DocuSign.
There you go. There you go. So anyway, I had a great time. I got in a game. I'm looking forward to playing more games. So we'll play this weekend a little bit and we'll report on that.
Sounds great.
We'll post a bunch of pictures. So, all right, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to leap right into House of Shadow.
You got to whisper it. Psychoterically.
That's right. All right, we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. And one thing I realized, Josh reminded me as we had wrapped up, was, did you want to talk anything about the balance updates?
Yeah.
And I guess a little bit. I mean, I don't want to dive too long into it because this is a moment in time that this has happened and things are going to change again and whatnot. Let's just talk the rollout. I mean, I think they rolled them out. That's great.
Yeah.
The app for me didn't update till the next day, but I know some people, it was just based on timing.
My phone did automatically, but I had to actually update the iOS on my iPad before the app.
Oh, because it was behind.
Which I didn't realize it was behind, but
yeah. So, but it's updated now, and it's nice that it updated all the lists on it. There's some complaining I saw about, Codex Tyranids now you have to I don't know how the access to it is going to work.
Yeah, because the index is invalidated now.
Right.
Tyranid index is no longer a thing, so now it's just the codex, and it's similar to how they've done in the past editions.
Do you have a code?
You get a code with the codex, and then that unlocks it in the end for you to use. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's
so you
fairly
still need
reasonable.
to buy a codex in order to access.
We knew
stuff in the app.
I knew.
Yeah.
I don't know if the general public knew.
No surprise.
I knew there is no way all the units are going to remain free forever.
Yep.
Like it's, if you thought that, you are brand new to this hobby or you are not thinking straight. Like it's just an unfortunate part of this hobby.
Yeah.
This is how they choose to do that. We knew this was coming. So yeah, I guess you can lament that they don't change their policy, but I mean, okay. All right.
Did not take me by surprise.
Not at all.
How they
and when the Thousand Suns comes out, I'm going to buy that. And then I'm going to do the thing. And
buy the codex, get the code, got the thing.
Cool.
So the one thing they did with the app, just speaking of the app real quick, is now if you are not a Warhammer Plus subscriber, you can only have one roster at a time.
Oh, is that so?
So
that's still
so you
good.
still get it for one. Like if you're just playing a game and you either playing one thing regularly or you just want to make a one-off thing before you play a game, you still have access to that as long as it's not an army that you need to unlock with the code.
What if you need, and so let me ask you, what if I play Tyranids right now and I buy the Tyranid Codex, but I'm not a Warhammer Plus subscriber. Can I still use
if you have the code? I'm assuming this is assumption.
I don't know
at this point, but I think you would still get the unlock of that.
But you'd only be able to use the one.
But you'd only have one roster available.
Listen,
but you
can
delete and refresh every time you're playing a game. Just make a new roster.
I'm a Warhammer Plus subscriber, so I mean, I like the videos and stuff that they put up. I wish they'd put them up faster,
a little bit more regularly.
I know they have a lot. I know it takes a lot, but I would like to see more content up there. But this, I think this is part of that content.
Yep.
I mean, that's whatever. You know, yes, it would be great if it was all free. It's not.
It's not. Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so now let's actually talk about some of the rules changes, because we mentioned earlier there was a change to devastating wounds.
I think that's the biggest change, hands down.
Yeah,
how they handled that.
I had a hard time wrapping my head a little bit around how is this going to help? Okay. You know,
so it actually does make a big difference now.
Yeah,
and I'll put it into layman's terms.
Well, please do. I read the Goonhammer article on it, which I was like, but please do.
So the bigger difference between devastating wounds, how they were and how they are now, is devastating wounds will still ignore armor saves and invulnerable saves, but the damage no longer spills over.
Right.
So if you have a Wraith Knight that gets 3 attacks, it gets D3 attacks. Let's say it gets 3, and those attacks do 2d6 damage each. You're killing 3 models.
They don't become
you're not killing
mortal
66 models.
Right. They kill
3.
Yeah.
At most,
as many dice as you threw.
Yeah.
Right, which is huge, because then you're not using weapons that were meant to destroy tanks to wipe out squads of guys.
Yeah. Because mortal wounds up until this change were very much how Age of Sigmar deals with it, where they spill over.
Right.
Because damage in 40k does not spill over. Like if you overkill a model, it kills that model and the wounds are lost.
A weapon that does 3 mortal wounds kills 1 Imperial Guardsman, and then it spills over to the next Imperial Guardsman, and then the next Imperial Guardsman.
Right.
Now it would just kill that one Imperial Guardsman.
Kill the 3 times over.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a good change.
Yeah, it's a very good change.
That pairs up with Fate Dice and Eldar especially, in that you can't have Wraith Knights dealing devastating wounds using a 6 as a Fate Dice, knowing that you're going to just decimate and overkill units with those.
Right. They'll still destroy tanks.
Yeah, really well.
And monsters.
But they're not a one size fits all offensive unit to kill anything.
That's a very important. I mean, it's just the classification of the weapon was never meant to be an infantry killer.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that solves that somewhat elegantly.
Yeah.
Do you think they went far enough with the Eldar reign-in?
I'm not sure. Points are definitely up. Like my list went up quite a bit.
So Wraith Knight is like 550 points or something like that. Yeah. It's insane.
It's probably the most expensive unit in the game. Other side, until you get to like Titans or something.
But they're brutal.
But they're awesome.
Yeah.
But looking at them now, because they are way more purpose. They have one more singular purpose now compared to they're just good at everything.
That's true.
for that point of like for those points makes them, I don't know. I think there is a lot of balance.
It's interesting because you have a rules change along with the points change at the same time, and that can get a little like in some. And it was funny because Lars said that to me initially because I don't like when they shift both these things. And I was like, whatever. And then the more I thought about them, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like if you can shift the points, then see what the results are, then you can make the appropriate rules or make a rules change, see what the result, and then apply the points.
Historically, like, Games Workshop always does both at the same time.
And that may make the Wraith Knight overcosted.
Yes.
Right? Which they could rein back in later.
I think the original Index release, if you look at the field, whatever it's called, the Munitorum manual for points, I think they originally came out at something like 350 points. So they've gone up over 150 points since the original Index. And obviously they're still really good, but are they worth that points? I don't know.
I don't know. They made some change to the towering as well that has some impact.
You can hide from it now, which before it's like line of sight is just yes all the time.
Right.
Yeah, so now you can hide behind a ruin.
Yeah.
As long as it's not right up next to it. But good change. My
again,
Marine list.
I don't want to just focus on the Eldar.
Yeah,
right. Like this is a change across multiple waves.
It helps. I don't know if it's enough. It helps.
Yeah. I think every little bit helps.
It's the start of the process to rein it in.
Thousand Suns saw some point change that makes me change my list.
Yeah.
Zeech. And again, like I said, my Lord of Change, I was like, oh my goodness, like this guy is really, really good.
He gets work done.
Really good, and yeah. I mean, I think he probably could go up a few points. That makes sense, and he
it's
did.
It's still worth it.
Yeah. And it's still, to me, it's like, yep, I'll still take him. How do I adjust everything else so I keep him in the army? Right.
He's the linchpin.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I'm happy to see is I think, I don't know if it's universally across the board, but definitely the several armies that I looked at, melee units in general have come down in points.
Yep.
Helping them with their viability, just because it
is
harder to get more models into melee now. So melee is a little bit less killy than it used to be because just how you have to be in direct base-to-base contact with a model and base-to-base contact.
This has always been the struggle, though, with 40K is shooting versus...
Right, yeah.
I mean, look, at real warfare. Like, there's a reason we use guns and we stopped using swords, but here you have this fantasy world where it's like, yes, we want to use swords and guns, drive me closer so I can hit them.
Yeah.
It's there's an inherent advantage to being able to kill your enemy at range.
There's a reason. Yeah.
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 But overall, I think it's a great first step.
Yep.
I will say, in my very limited experience at this point, I'm not by no means a 40K expert player. The index cards feel rushed. The rules on them feel a bit rushed. That's fine.
That's an entire, how many factions of 40K are there now?
16, 18, something like that. Look, and it was, we got to get this out.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be able to play their army. Yes, it may not be the ideal play situation, but we'll get them out there and everybody will be able to play with them, and then we'll
dial it in. Yeah.
We'll start the whole process over again.
I mean, what I'll be curious to see is codexes as they drop. Like, how many of those are already baked in? Like, Marines are probably already printed. Tyranids have probably been printed for 6 months already, right?
Absolutely.
So, at least until like later ones, like Eldar are slated to be a year out. Like they're next summer, I think, is when they're on the calendar come out. So that book probably isn't in printing yet. Like I'm sure it's still in playtesting and figuring out. So we'll see how different that book is when it comes out. And something that you posed a question just out of curiosity was, I wonder if they actually bump that book up because the index is problematic at the moment. And like,
could be.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah. Either way, look, here's the thing. I'm having fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Winning, losing, whatever. It's all fun.
Much like the Dark Heresy game, like we messed up a bunch of rules at the beginning. I even say right at the beginning episode, we're going to get some stuff wrong here. It's okay. When I talked to John French briefly about it, because he and Alan wrote the scenarios that we're running, it was, he asked, how did this go? And I said, well, let me tell you, here's what I did, and here's what I accelerated, here's what I changed, and blah, 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 because of these reasons. And he's like, oh, cool. And I go, but everybody seemed to have fun. And I said, that's the ultimate objective. And he goes, yeah, I mean, change whatever you got to change. As long as people are having fun, it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
Yeah, so, right.
Nobody getting hurt. So, okay. Anyway, I felt like that was out there and it was something I wanted to talk with because we haven't even had a conversation about it yet. But overall, I think, yeah, it's a step in the right direction. They're going to have to make other steps in other directions. I still think the Fate dice are maybe a little strong, especially guys that are able to regenerate Fate dice. Come on. You know, there's going to have to be some adjustments there, but they'll get to it, I think, or they'll get to it at the Codex time, and that's fine.
And I think it'll look
and nobody will like you while you're playing this army in the meantime.
You got a year. Enjoy it. Enjoy your time on top.
Super fun. It's fine. It's fine. You don't see me jumping. I could easily go say, I'm going to play Shell Zeldar, which was something I had considered before I even knew how strong they were, you know, and I was like, oh, but I'm also glad to see some armies getting addressed that are super struggling, like Votann and Death Guard.
Right, yeah.
Who would have thought Death Guard would be at the bottom of this pile? But I'm like, oh my God, what happened? They used to be so strong, you know? So, cool.
Yeah.
It's all a process. It's a process, and working through the process.
It's an evolution. There's going to be iterations.
And it'll be the same in 11th edition.
The only constant is change. Yeah.
The only constant is change. Hence is each player. All right. Let's take a break from that, and let's finally leap into our coverage of the House of Shadow.
Absolutely.
So, Josh, let me set the stage here a little bit. You play this game.
I do.
This is your primary game.
This is my primary gang.
Last episode we covered Goliath, which is the gang I play.
Yeah.
So you're going to be steering a bit of the conversation here. But we've both read through House of Shadows. You have more experience playing it than I do. I guess I'll save my like takeaways to the end here. But I will tell you, it is an enjoyable backstory, and the lore around it I found enjoyable. As we talk more about it, you'll hear I'm a little disappointed in the lack of support of model line at this point, but that's my only complaint about it. And I think that, you know, maybe those will come in the future.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll talk a little bit about some people, what they've done to work around that, what we would do, you know, those kinds of things. But let's talk about, who are we talking about?
We're talking about the Delaque here, the House of Shadow.
House Delaque.
Yes.
So one of the gangs of Necromunda. For those who have not played Necromunda in the past, you're playing very small forces. Unlike 40K, you're playing, you know, maybe 8 to 10 models around that.
Yeah.
It's like some could be more, some could be less, depends on points and what you're spending.
Some missions specifically only give you 3 or 4 models also.
Very true. Yep. So not a lot of investment in terms of, you know, modeling and that kind of thing. It's funny, I sometimes hear that called out as oh, get into Necromunda, it'll be cheaper. And then they show you like all the books for Necromunda. The books are pricey.
There's a lot fewer that you need now, especially with the new consolidated rulebook.
But I would point out,
what you need is the terrain.
Another consolidated rulebook. You know, I was just like, I got to rebuy the rules again, you know. And then you, of course, said, "Oh, well, there's some significant changes."
There are, yeah.
Like, oh my God, all right, fine. Eventually, I'll go buy this book, you know. But this is like the third Necromunda rulebook I've bought. I mean, granted, the first one came with the Start Collecting set. The second one I actually bought.
Now a separate one. And then there was the Ash Waste one, which consolidated a lot. And now there's the consolidated compendium rulebook.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Which has everything in it, incling vehicle rules. And so if you didn't get Ash Waste, it does have those in there, which is great. And then
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. It's not, and you talked about the terrain. So Necromunda is it's
the real expense of the game is in the terrain.
Yes, but it can be cheap. It's all on the amount of work you want to do. That being said, don't get into the hobby because you're like, oh, it's going to be cheap. You know, it's not. It's a miniature wargaming hobby by Games Workshop. You will pay one way or the other.
They'll get you somehow.
They'll get your blood somehow. So that being said, it's set in the Hive world.
Planet of Necromunda.
Planet of Necromunda in the Hive Spire of...
Hive Primus is the main spire there, and obviously there's a couple other...
Lord Helmwar. I think that's how it's pronounced. It runs this thing, but you're playing gangs, and House Delaque is one of these gangs. Now, when you talk about a gang, it's not like a gang you'd see in... Michael Jackson's Beat It. It's like we're talking, they're large organizations.
Yeah.
Very large organizations.
Yeah, the gangs actually stem off of the houses themselves. So these are kind of the thugs of the house, for lack of a better term,
right,
going out and doing kind of the dirty work, because the gang or the houses themselves are not legally allowed
dirty their hands
to have open warfare, right. And also they consider themselves above it, but they also need to get stuff done.
Yeah. Now House Delaque sits in a very interesting place.
They really do. Yeah.
So, okay. Where do you want to start?
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take it away.
So, one thing which we started with the last Underhive faction focus with the Goliath was starting back in the 1995 rulebook, the Necromunda rulebook.
Yeah.
And looking at the lore of what these gangs had back there. And every gang in that book it's a 2-paragraph maximum of what the lore was, which is, nothing compared to like the 35 plus pages of what the lore has been expanded to now. But similarly, how we've talked about Eldar in the past, of how they had that vision for what the Eldar were and how that hasn't changed much. Like they really just kind of nailed it in the first shot. Like they've really gotten the flavor of each of these gangs uniquely dialed in way back there in 1995. And then they've only now expanded and extrapolated upon that. But the core concepts were there in the beginning and have continued to grow.
It's not until later that you kind of look back on that and realize the genius of it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And again, the one that I really call out for that was the Eldar backstory and just how deep it went. And I had no idea until we did our coverage of that. And then I thought, oh, all this is new. Nope.
It's always been there. Yeah.
It's been expanded upon and fleshed out a bit, but the core framework and structure is there, and that's the same with this.
Yeah, on a much smaller scale, because the gangs just have less compared to an entire race in the 40K universe.
Way less.
But yeah, same essence there. So in a nutshell, back in 1995, Delaque they're spies. They really specialize in espionage, spies, information brokering, assassinations, things like that. These the old models especially they were just guys in trench coats with sunglasses, really. Like shotguns, trench coats, and sunglasses was really kind of the essence of Delaque back then. The models have evolved to actually meet the lore a little bit better these days.
They reminded me back then of, there was a video game out, which was a cyberpunk video game called Syndicate. And they reminded me of those guys big time.
Yeah.
Then they kind of evolve into what they are now, which is pale-faced.
Yeah. Pale face.
Cybernetic eyes, trench coats.
Visors. Still have the trench coats, have the rebreathers, and they even back then the lore had them, they're like light sensitive, which kind of plays into the pale skin, and they're almost the vampires of the Underhive, but vampires never mentioned, just aesthetically and light sensitivity. And it's funny how that actually plays into how the gang plays with some of their tactics cards and shenanigans that they can pull out there, which we'll get into a little bit more depth later. Same thing. Just the Delaque have had this the intolerance of the light. They're more known to kind of lurk in the deep recessed areas of the hive. And then we get to the Gangs of the Underhive, which came out in 2017. So this is the first real evolution.
So that's a long leap.
22 years later, revisiting.
So one of the things you mentioned there, though, is like Delaque are spies.
Yes.
And the funny thing about that is, like, how does this pale-faced, cybernetic-eyed, alien-looking guy sneak anywhere, right? And so we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they answer that. They
do.
But initially you look at, you're like, okay, spies, cool. How does that work?
They're all James Bond.
That's yeah. Okay.
So the Gangs of the Underhive really starts expanding more upon the mystery of the Delaque.
Yeah.
Where did they come from? How did they get here? What are they doing here? And there's this reoccurring theme that all the information that we know about the Delaque either comes from the Delaque or has been told enough times by just the kind of gestalt knowledge of the hive that it's accepted as truth. But almost everything that they say about this gang, they also call out as, but maybe that's a lie.
It could be a lie.
It could be a lie. This could be a false truth. This could be a misconception.
They're the Alpha Legion of the gangs.
Yeah. And Delaque don't dispel any of these myths. Like anything that is associated with the Delaque, like they're happy to have that there. And like if
that
people,
misunderstanding or even encourage the confusion.
It's a misdirection on top of a misunderstanding.
But that being said, it's all of like 3 pages of detail,
right?
In Gangs of
Underhive. Which is it's still pretty short, but it does it's
expand
the next evolutionary step of what we have here from the original book. And there's fun quotes reading through that again, and like if everything's a truth, everything is a lie. And it's just really it kind of distills and brings home that mystery element of the Delaque. And then from there, we jump into the House of Shadow, which really takes the deep dive into who the Delaque are.
So can I tell you, just from a visual perspective, and again, this has not been a gang that I have been drawn to particularly. I see why you are drawn to it, and I see why Justin is drawn to it.
Even back in '95, I love this game.
Yeah. But it's not been, like, as I looked at all the gangs, you know, honestly, even the Goliath weren't something I was like, oh, I have to play Goliath, but it happened to be the one that came in the starter box, and as I got them built up, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of grew to like them. The artwork in House of Shadows, in comparison to even the gangs of the Underhive, leaps forward. Like, it is incredible.
There's some really cool just character
all of these books, all of the Necromunda specific
the
gang books, have just amazing artwork. Like just the black and white stuff is just gorgeous. Like in many cases, it's better than the color plates, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%.
Although there's one color plate.
They're grittier, they're detailed. They just exude so much character and personality.
For sure.
And in which, in the House Goliath one, the House of
there's some
Chains,
great stuff.
We had some, and we did include a lot of those in the video format. So little plug for video too. We'll have a lot of that.
So I'll show you a few of these.
To check out. So the big thing that House of Shadows brings into the fold here, it rounds out a lot of the backstory. Delaque sit in a really interesting place in that they don't manufacture anything.
Right.
They don't make anything.
Goliath are working forges and this kind of thing. Like there's a productivity and an industry to almost all of these.
Escher
gangs.
make drugs for everybody. Van Sar make weapons. Orlok are actually mining all the raw materials that the Goliath turn into stuff. And Delaque don't make anything.
So what does Delaque do?
They provide information and they kill people.
And when you say they provide information, I think what you're really saying is they are the keepers of a lot of information. So and like you say, information is power. These guys can leverage that information to get what they want.
And they're
or you pay them so they don't share that
information.
Yes.
And they're happy either way, right? And they'll take money and not share information and then sell that information.
That's right.
They'll double dip it. They sit in kind of a privileged place where that Lord Helmwar, he's kind of there in some way, his eyes and ears of the hive too. So they are supplying information up hive because a lot of the hivers, the nobles in the houses and above, don't want to do anything below what they call the wall, which is kind of like the shield to their palaces up above at the top of the spire, where the air is pure and the food is plentiful and all that. So they don't want to dirty their hands. They don't want to be involved at all, but they want to know that their control is there, their influence is there, etc. So they actually kind of are an intermediary that they can supply information both ways, which is a unique spot.
And so not just information. Yes, they are information brokers and that kind of thing, but they're also assassins.
Yes, they are.
Right?
Yeah.
So, you need somebody killed? These are the...
You got a problem? We'll take care of it.
These are the guys you'll talk, and then they'll take care of it quietly or noisily or however you want it taken care of. So I think it's interesting, like, where they fit in. That is the one major difference with them is they don't provide any kind of... physical service. Correct. Well, I guess the assassination is a physical service, but it's
they're not supplying goods or commodities. They're providing service.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, even as we talk later about like where are they housed, because like you have the Goliath down in the forges, you have other groups working in laboratories. Like here, these guys are. Where do they live? Everywhere and nowhere.
And nowhere. We're everywhere.
That's right. That's right. Which feeds into what do we know about them?
More of that mystery. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. I'll wait to dive into that one. Part of this book says, one of the interesting things, and I'll just read it here, is that only 2 truths are known about the Delaque. Or they've been told so many times they've been accepted as truth. One, that all Delaque share some kind of instinctive bond, being able to communicate silently and over great distances. So there's a psychic connection there.
But is it psychic? Well, we'll talk about that.
Maybe. And then they are led by a group known as the Silent Ones, but who they are, no one knows.
That's right. That's right. And then the other point that came out in the book is their relationship with Helmwar.
Yeah.
You alluded to he uses them for this, that, and the other thing. There is some discussion that they have something on Helmwar.
Yes.
And so, they forced their way. I mean, they basically took over another house. And the way they described the takeover is really, really interesting, where you had a house that was kind of getting weaker, point the fingers at Delaque saying, hey, Delaque is psychic, unsanctioned psychers. We need to get, I think they were trying to even get like
they bring in the Inquisition. Yeah, they did.
To come deal with it. But the Inquisition was kind of like, we're not gonna get so involved in this, and ends up this guy forms an army of really just ragtag, bounty hunters and other people, and Delaque kind of just insidiously takes over the house by neutralizing certain points and pointing out information, and next thing you know. And it was really cool because like the way it's described in the book, it feels almost like this shadow kind of passes over the house. And then as it passes over the house, well, Delaque's now running.
Now
the
it's
house.
Delaque.
Now it's Delaque.
It's always been Delaque. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's right.
So the interesting thing is even stories like that, there's like, is that true? Did that actually happen? There's so many.
No, they specifically say, I can't remember the name of the noble that runs the house, or the name. It starts with an A, I think, Astor or something like that. They don't even know, like, well, nobody knows what actually happened to him, but what happened to the house was it went away and Delaque took its place.
One of the really interesting things of just the background of Delaque here is where did they come from? And there's a lot of questions and a lot of potentialities proposed on how Delaque came to Necromunda. Some say they're actually an offshoot of House Helmwar itself.
Right.
That they're kind of this bastard line that has been shunned from, advancing and taking over the house. There's people who think that they were brought in from off planet. There's rumors that they actually evolved from a water species on Necromunda, even though there's no evidence of Necromunda ever being a water planet beforehand.
That's right.
Yeah, there's speculation that they're this, psychic.
The story you're alluding to is that like millions of years ago, before humanity even reached the stars,
correct? Yeah,
there was Necromunda, and there were these vast seas in Necromunda, and at the bottom of the seas there was this particular race that was very smart and psychically powerful, and as the oceans began to dry up, they came out with this race came out with this plan for how they would extend their life once life came back to
the
Necromunda.
Larger forms are allegedly still in water at the core of the planet now, according to this particular myth.
Particular story.
Yeah.
I don't believe this story.
And the Delaque, evolved and, became land dwellers and and it's just, but
I think parts of it are true.
Right. Which is the whole thing with Delaque.
Right.
Like there are 6 or 7 different Genesis stories on how Delaque came to Necromunda in here, and each one is as feasible and ridiculous as the next one. So
right.
How did they get there? I don't know.
But I think ultimately parts of all of them are probably
likely
true. Right. Like any good story, there's some part of it is rooted in the truth. So
right. Yep,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about, let's focus on kind of where the book lands in terms of their origin. I guess before we even need to talk about that, we got to talk a little bit about a point you hit earlier, which is, are they psychers or not?
Yes.
Every member of the Delaque has the ability to communicate with each other at a glance.
Yes.
They have the ability to sense that there are other Delaque around them.
and size up the potency of the presence, whatever presence that is, within each other.
And what's it called? There's a
Psychoterica is the overall name, and then there's a thing called the Psychoteric Whispers.
Right.
It's kind of this that's the actual game mechanic of it. Just the more Delaque you have, the more concentration of this Psychoterica there is.
Right. So Psychoterica is whatever it is. The Imperium would not classify it as psychic.
Right.
Right. It does not quite meet the
doesn't meet the threshold.
The threshold.
It's not black ship worthy.
Right. But clearly there's some kind of power at play here. And this is where the story that we're about to talk about with the rogue planet and all this comes into play. But this is where it gets really interesting to me, because you have this pseudo-psychic ability. And what I love about all of this is, at the end of the day, you have this, how do I even describe it? You have this, one of the fundamentals of 40K is that there's like this encroaching darkness that is overriding humanity.
Right.
Whether that's the Tyranids coming from another galaxy and wiping us out.
Yeah.
Whether that's chaos insidiously and, driving into humanity and overtaking it, whether that's the Necrons waking up and recapturing. Yeah. Right. What you have here is this presence that is really, really ominous. And quite frankly, it's almost like this eldritch horror presence that takes place, that these guys, these creatures, whatever the Delaque are at this point, are able to communicate to each other, are able to manipulate powers that we don't even understand, because they are not psychic powers.
Right.
They're truly not psychic. It's a whole new classification of power.
The silent ones definitely give me a very old Elder Gods vibe to it. Just the whole structure. There's definitely that vibe to the gang.
And so I think the story that I kind of glommed onto, and the one that the book kind of leads you down, I felt, down the path of like, here's kind of what has happened, what all this means. Like, it still leaves a lot of it vague.
Right.
But was this rogue planet passes by, and it takes years to pass by, maybe even generations. They're not particularly clear. And as it passes by Necromunda, whatever's on that planet calls out to people. And people begin to, and not immediately, like they don't like get up and walk out, but I imagine this is where I drew the Eldritch Horror comparisons. Like the Call of Cthulhu is people begin experiencing these dreams, and and it's Cthulhu talking to them, and slowly they have this degradation of their sanity. And what happens is eventually, over this period of years, people begin to just kind of leave. Like they may get up in the middle of the night in their bedclothes and walk out, and nobody knows where they go. And where it turns out they're all going is very, very deep into like the sump areas of Necromunda. Sumps sit below
into the depths.
Underhive.
Yeah.
Yep. And over the course of years, thousands of people just vanish.
Right. Yeah.
They just get up and walk out.
And this is called the Lost, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and then what happens is, like, they're just gone. People don't know where they've gone. Then what occurs is they start showing up again, but clearly changed. And
a little bit paler.
Yeah. And a little more organized. And they start taking out certain, performing certain, it starts out slow. Like, I don't want to call them like terrorist actions, but like they may attack something or take over something. And then they grow and grow. And next thing you know, they've taken over this.
It's almost like a gene stealer cult, like prepping for the invasion to come. But it's from.
And this is, I actually call this out in our notes where I say, of all the gangs, this is the one that is the most alien.
Oh, for sure.
I go, and not alien in the sense of the movie Alien, but it's like eldritch alien, like
Xenos.
Yeah. And I go, even taking into account that you can run gene stealer cults in Necromunda,
yeah,
it's on par with that.
Right.
It's on par with that level of creepiness. Like, honestly, this is a really creepy story.
I love it.
Like they all these people just go away and they're hearing this call from whatever's on this planet.
From the silent ones.
And it moves on. The rogue planet moves on. In fact, there's even stories about it's returning and what's going to happen then. But whatever occurs, these people are changed as a result. And who knows why? Maybe they had latent psychic abilities that it tapped into, or who knows why they were chosen. Nobody knows.
Bestowed gifts upon them. But it also plays into the rumors of you mentioning them being alien. The most alien is that there are definitely rumors that maybe these are humanoid-looking aliens
that's possible
that they have infiltrated the planet.
Yeah.
Which,
and then you also have. Okay, so then let's step back because you talked about this race that lived in the oceans, and everybody's like, no oceans ever existed.
Which, the silent ones are what we keep alluding to, and these were thought to be the most superior apex ocean beings when Necromunda was an ocean planet.
Right.
But there is zero evidence that Necromunda was ever an ocean planet.
Here's my guess. This is what I'm going to take away. Here's my conspiracy theory. The rogue planet has something to do with this race that existed a long time ago. It comes by and kind of reconstitutes or reemerges this race that then calls to these people, and they use them. I don't want to say as hosts, but maybe hosts in a way. And now you have basically Delaque is the next evolution of whatever this race was.
Yeah.
And that's my take on it.
It's actually interesting to note that in game terms, compared to Gangs of the Underhive to House of Shadow, this psychic component or psychoterica and just this kind of connection has definitely been amplified.
Yeah.
Like they've really expanded upon this and it's extrapolated and evolved this idea. And it does have game term mechanics, which we'll get to later in the show. But this is something like the idea was there, but it was never to this level. So this is really expanded.
And the reason I came to that conclusion is because there is a unit called the Piscian Spector.
Yeah.
Which is specifically, they talk about, and it could be Piscian.
I say Piscian is how
I could see it being Piscian. Okay. The Piscian Spector is, they say in the description, what is it? Oh, they are, the rumor is that they're, let me just find it here. The harvested Xenospray Spector retains many of its memories. Okay. Nobody knows for sure where they come from. It is believed they are an aquatic race that arrived from Necromunda millennia ago and made their home in the subterranean seas. Occasionally, ancient members of this race come to the Delaque to have their brains placed in these machines, and the two races sharing a common connection to the psychoterica. So, and that's interesting because
that's a unit entry.
This is all littered, throughout the book, and that's a unit entry with that lore. That's, again, they allude to this thing that happened millions of years ago, and then they're like, oh, so here's this thing.
There's no evidence of that ever being the case. Except for maybe this.
Yeah, and so these things kind of piece together, and you go, okay, so there's probably some truth. And this is why I always say there's some truth to this. It's probably not to the extreme that, the stories take it, but there's elements of that, and there's seeds of that are true. True, quote unquote.
Always quotes everything
true. And also true in our science fiction fantasy universe.
Right, yes. Or future histories of made up
our future fake history.
Yeah.
So anyway, I found that, like, all that deep lore to be fascinating to the point where I asked Ed Brown, my buddy that used to run Forge World customer support, and honestly, closer friend to Alan Bly than I was, I said, hey, did Alan write some of this stuff? Because this looks like this kind of has like his fingerprints all over it. And of course, there's no, attribution in the books to who wrote what. But I'm telling you, like, this feels like something that Alan, like, this is the gang Alan would have played.
Yeah.
And Ed was like, when was it printed? I said, 2021. And that was kind of before, or that was after Alan passed. But I promise you, I bet he had some.
This was also one of the last House of books to come out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they already had that framework
I'm sure,
and at least pieced together.
I think he at least probably had.
Would not be surprised.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. So Alan was big into like that and like worms going into people's brains. worm, creatures made of worms. He liked all that stuff. So this is right up his alley. And I think that, I think it's creepy. Like it's super creepy.
I love it. Yeah, so, I've always had a appeal for that kind of Cthulhu, obviously being such a huge influence in my nerd upbringing.
For the both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the psychic connection, the kind of that Eldar mythos thing, like this kind of really brings it together. And then also just the mystery. Like a lot of people always describe this gang as Dark City, which if you remember Dark City, the movie is,
I love Dark
City. The movie, right? Visually, at least.
What's his name from 24, isn't it? Kiefer Sutherland is in it.
Yeah.
He plays the crazy doctor guy.
I need to watch that again.
That's a good movie. Yeah, and these guys have visually, they look a lot like the Dark City guys. I don't want to 30 years that movie's been out or whatever. Spoiler alert, but go see Dark City if you haven't. It's really a classic. So, how have they evolved over the years? In comparison to original source material, I think we've touched on
lore-wise. I think we covered that pretty well. I'll say just from the gameplay standpoint, I'll jump in there.
Yeah, please.
Delaque and Gangs of the Underhive were actually a very shooty gang.
Okay,
like they had some shenanigans. The tactics cards for Delaque have always had a lot of flavor in the shenanigans that they bring. They have cards like turning out the lights and things like that, which plays into obviously in the lore, every Delaque has their eyes have been replaced by either a visor, an implant, something like that. So they all have these kind of biomechanical apparatuses for eyes. And they are essentially photo goggles, so they can, see in the dark. They just dwell in darker places within the hive naturally. So that them having tactics cards that let them, get extra guys infiltrating or turning the lights out so that they can see and nobody else can see.
That's cool.
Things like that. Their tactics cards really kind of bring the gang to life in that kind of shenanigan. They're very, I'm blanking on the word here. Synergistic.
Okay.
In the way that the units play and how they interact with their tactics cards.
Interesting. I think a lot of Necromunda gangs are. This one probably leans more heavily into it.
Yeah, more so than
it reminds me of like I remember in fifth through 7th edition, the Eldar had to be like you had to work together. Like they more than any other army, you had to make sure you had this here and this here to be able to do these things. This is that kind of force. It requires. I wouldn't have called it. And this is one of the things I was thinking as I was going through it. Like, it's good that they don't have this as one of the starting box gangs.
They do now.
Right.
Yeah.
But initially, it was Escher and Goliath, which made a lot of sense. Like, they're very straightforward.
A little bit more straightforward.
This one requires a lot of nuance.
Goliath and Escher are a little bit more polar opposites too, and like one's small and speedy female, one's big, meaty, and male. So just so many ways that they contrast.
Yeah, but this does require quite a bit of nuance, which is the kind of play I think you enjoy. Lot in these games.
They're definitely a little bit more nuanced. The new version of this coming out in House of Shadow is interesting because they are not as shooty of a gang. They still are shooty, but now they're relying on what makes them special, what makes them unique. So they have access to specific weapons like flechette pistols, which have toxin in them, and that helps get around the toughness of things like Goliath units. They have web guns and web gauntlets that helps them mitigate, again, tougher creatures, tougher models, things with multiple wounds you could just potentially knock out in a single shot. And then they also have all their tactics cards in there. This book really ups the psychoteric influence of Delaque.
Very much so.
And this actually brings, so Delaque, when it's an option. So this one you pay as an upgrade to give them the psychoteric whispers. And this actually does turn them into unsanctioned psychers. So it's a concentration. The more potent you are, you actually get access to psychic powers, which we'll get to again in a little bit more detail later on. But it actually brings that aspect of the gang to life, which is just a really neat thing. And I've always just loved this psychic aspect of, again, going back to Cthulhu and 40K, like the occult, psychic powers, magic, things like that.
And they have like 3 different brands of this they can boil into, right?
Yes.
And what were those 3? Do you recall?
Madness, Delusion, and I'm blanking.
Yeah,
on
I can't remember the third one
right
off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So you choose kind of from these 3 various schools, but the schools are very thematic to the
Super
darkness
thematic.
and creepiness of the units.
And they also get more powerful the more Delaque that are nearby. So they're drawing from that kind of innate psychoterica that each Delaque possesses. So whoever's casting the power, say there's 3 guys next to them, they get to expand the range of the like how much influence they can exert on the actual in-game battlefield on that, just by having more whispers nearby and more concentration of that psychoterica.
One thing, let's step back a bit, because I realized we forgot to talk about one thing too, which is earlier I said, how could they be assassins if they just stand out as these white guys? I mean, look, you could shoot somebody from a distance, you could spring out of the shadows and kill a guy, but assassins and spies in particular, I mean, I assume you have probably some psychic abilities, or psychoteric abilities to help that, but the best spies could be anywhere and not be seen.
Yeah.
How do these guys accomplish this?
Well, they do get to sneak around quite a bit. The other way,
not necessarily in gameplay, but lore-wise.
Yeah. Lore-wise, one of the ways they do the most spying is they actually use other people to do their spying, and these people aren't even realizing that they're spying for them.
So they're manipulating them.
They're manipulating people. They are really good at finding information that could be completely worthless to anybody else. This is just knowledge, but they know how to apply that knowledge or give that knowledge to the right person. If there was anything specific,
I thought they've also expanded upon being able to take on the looks of other people and things.
There's
at least one character.
There's one character who I will talk about specifically.
Okay, because I'll talk about one too.
They're in my gangs of legend,
right?
So I'll get to that spot. So just a cool thing that we're alluding to here anyways is Delaque have in their territories that nobody else knows where they are. They have found all these gaps in between the habs and things like that.
Right.
So they've really, they know all the tunnels, they know all the networks, and this isn't even down in the forges like Goliath know those like the back of their hands. Delaque
even
know
everything
top to bottom, right? Yeah. So they know all the higher up stuff. They're hiding all this stuff in plain sight, and they're in all these spaces right next to people who have no idea that they're there. So they're sneaking around, they're listening, they're able to easily traverse through the hive,
right?
More so than any other gang, just because they know this network of how to get around, which is kind of a cool thing of how they're doing these spying and assassinations too. Like they have access to these areas that people thought was secure, and they can just pop up and be like, oh no, I was here the whole time, and now you're dead.
All right. Moving on. So let's talk a little bit about the house organizational structure.
Yep, absolutely.
Because every house has who's in charge.
Who's in charge is everyone alludes to. So there's this kind of open secret that the Silent Ones are this presence of Delaque. Nobody knows exactly what they are, whether they are these elder gods, for lack of a better term, or a presence, or it's an organization. Who knows? But what we do know in the real world is, or we know, quote, is that the Star Chamber is in charge of the House Delaque.
Right.
And these are people that have the strongest psychoteric connections.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the Star Chamber is it's not even a chamber.
It's not a chamber.
Nor is it a star.
Yeah. Nor is it a star. Or nor is it a the.
Maybe. Or it could be. That's all.
It's a collection of individuals. Right. That it's not an inherited position. It's not something determined by blood right. It's whoever has the strongest connection to the psychoterica is a member of this chamber.
And they kind of naturally converge together to determine where the direction of the house is going to go.
What do we need to do? And this is not a permanent position either. So if somebody is born, created, whatever, that has more of a psychoteric connection, like whoever's the low man in that chamber is ousted.
Yeah.
Naturally. And they'll just,
it's not even like a violent oust.
No, yeah.
It just melds.
They just know. Yeah. It's more of this kind of almost a hive mind.
Which also kind of leads back to the Gene Stealer cults, right? I mean, it feels very... in a very different way. It's very Gene Stealer culty.
You were joking earlier in that about metachlorian counts, and they can sense each other who's got the higher count, but it very much does kind of feel that way in the lore, is that they can just sense the psychoteric connection of other Delaque in the area and be like, oh, this guy is higher up than me.
Right. And the reason I brought that up was because initially I was confused over what is this psychoteric? Is it just at one point I thought it was an actual physical object, but I don't think that's the case. Or if it is, it's on that rogue planet that passed by or what have you.
Or it's down below where the deep ones are.
Or it could be, who knows? But for whatever reason, and I said to Josh, I go, oh, so it's like the Force, like, everybody has a midichlorian count, which not to dumb this down because that does dumb it down a bit, but to a sense, like in essence, whoever's more powerful kind of gets this. And it could be somebody new, and the next guy just kind of steps out of the way and says, oh, okay, this guy's now in charge. Yep. And it's not even like they have that discussion. It just naturally occurs.
They just know. Yeah, it's instinct more than anything, or a sense. So below the Star Chamber.
Though, the Delaque are also happy. Like, the Star Chamber is kind of an open thing. Like, other people know, oh, there's this thing called the Star Chamber that's what runs Delaque. And they don't disabuse people of the notion that it's a location.
Right.
But it's not.
Yeah. If people want to find the Star Chamber.
Oh, sure. Go look for
it. Good luck.
And the impression I get is these guys don't even necessarily have to be in close physical proximity of each other.
And they have the strongest connection to the Psychoterica. So they can have the most range of communication, things like that. Yeah. So
pretty awesome.
It's like
the ultimate, it's like the ultimate terrorist cell, right? Like you couldn't,
telepathically, psychically communicating,
and you could never wipe it out because they never have to get together,
right?
So
and you have to find them. And Delaque are by far the hardest to find. Nobody even knows where they are, anyways.
Right?
Nobody knows exactly.
Well, and this is why they can operate without a particular base of operations. Right. And I'll talk to you more about that in gameplay too, because some gameplay has to do with holding territory, and it's like, well, why would they hold territory? But yeah, I mean, they're both individuals and collective.
Right.
So,
yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So after the Star Chamber.
After the Star Chamber, we have the Master of Shadow.
Yep.
And each gang leader is essentially a Master of Shadow.
Right.
And these are determined, again, by psychoteric connection. So this is not like, I overthrew the slave tyrant and like I'm the biggest, baddest guy like Goliath would be or something like that. It's that I do have that strongest connection to the Psychoterica.
And it's like, and I had to. And I'm like, okay,
national
so you're in charge.
Just forms because of that. So,
which is interesting because it eliminates some of the problem that Goliath has, right? Goliath and a lot of these other gangs have infighting to achieve rank. Here, nope.
There's an interesting mention because there is infighting in Delaque, but it's to a much, much lesser degree than any other gang.
Yeah.
And because there's this kind of psychic connection of what everybody kind of knows what the plan is. There's just kind of this general interconnected consciousness, for lack of a better term. And that if there's a problem and Delaque need to take care of somebody, they need to do it very quickly before that person knows it's coming. So it's almost like a Viper strike of like, okay, this person's a problem. We need to take them out now before they know that it's a problem and that they know this plan's in place, because they're going to find out very quickly just through that connection.
And I think the important thing to say here, though, is that like Delaque are not, well, my takeaway on it is that they are not a hive mind.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
They are individuals. They're individuals, but there is this connection between all of them, which is this psychoteric connection.
Interconnected consciousness, but not hive mind.
Right. They can all think and act on their own.
They're all independent.
Yeah. Okay.
But there is a big picture.
Yeah. Okay.
So below that, we have the Phantoms. These are generally going to be your champions, your knock goals, things like that. In game terms, really what these are doing is these are enhancing that Psychoterica connection. They're the choir to the Master of Shadow. So they're just the ever presence enhancement to that connection.
They're your champions.
They're the champions. Yeah. In game terms, they are actual champions. Phantoms are what champions are called, and then knock goals are a version of champions.
Got it. Okay.
So below them we have ghosts, and ghosts are just your everyday gang members of Delaque. So these are your just kind of rank and file gang members. And then below that we have the Lost, and these are not traditional Delaque. These aren't true Delaque, but these are people that are part of the Delaque organization, and these are really the frontmen of Delaque. These
guys
may
not even know they're working for Delaque in many
They're
cases.
running the territories, like they're running the bars and things like
businesses,
the businesses, and are brokering information, even if they don't know they're being used for this information. So the Lost are just kind of everybody else that Delaque are using to run their industries, but not actually pale-skinned eyeball Psychoterica Delaque. Potentially.
But they can elevate themselves, or they can be chosen to be elevated, and again, they kind of disappear for a while and then come back as these pale-faced.
There are some interesting things with that. So there's the mystery element of that, but there's also some allusion to, but also some known not issues, but interactions with Escher and chems and drugs that Escher produce. Knuckles specifically are produced by chems.
Same with spikers
and spikers, which are largely produced by Escher. Delaque also makes some of their own. They're they've got their fingers in all the different puddings.
But we'll talk about what spikers are when we talk about models,
and also Knuckles. As I keep saying,
we've picked our models.
Anyways, I think that covers the base pretty well. But there is this interesting interaction that Delaque are not entirely self-reliant on how they create these different terraces of their gang hierarchy.
Right.
There is some reliance with Escher primarily more than anybody, just for those.
Yeah. Another interesting story jumping back is when Goliath were created. Here's another point that we missed and we didn't address. At every major intersection of evolution or change within the power structure within High Primaris and Necromunda, the Delaque are there.
Yes.
They're and the impression is given that they are either allowing certain things to happen or causing the changes to evolve things to a bigger picture.
Yeah. So
when the houses were getting together to create the Goliath, they were there and allowed it to happen. And even encouraged it, and supported because it's why are they encouraging it? Because they know something, and so that's they're always supposed to be kind of behind the scenes orchestrating these kinds of changes. So that was one point we missed.
And all the other gangs kind of respect them and kind of hate them at the same time because they have that.
Them, I think.
They fear them. There's definitely the unknown aspect of that. There's so much mystery, but also again their connection with Helmar of they have this position of power, of prestige.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. The House of Shadow wasn't originally associated with Delaque at all. It was just Helmar's basically information. He would choose a house and be like, "You are the House of Shadow. You are my information gang." And it's just been Delaque for so long that by default they are the House of Shadow.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just synonymous with them now, but they were not the first.
They were not the first. Correct. No. Yeah.
That's a good point too. Okay, so let's talk about gangs of legend. So usually there's in the book there's a section called Gangs of Legend where it's usually this branch of the gang did this thing and was led by such and such. It's this book, I feel it's kind of limited. There's only kind of 3 examples, and one is a reprint out of the Gangs of the Underhive book, word for word reprint of what was said in the Gangs of the Underhive book. So that being said, I delved kind of far afoot to look for what I wanted to talk about, but let's talk about yours first.
I went with one of the classics because this is one of the ones.
This is one of the the core ones.
Was mentioned multiple times. So I went with Eos Three Nails, and this is it's not known if this is a single individual or if it's an entire gang that is attributed to this individual. And it's actually not even known by everybody if this is a Delaque or not.
Yeah.
But it's an assassin who is wildly efficient, the most efficient assassin that's out there. Every time there's a kill attributed to this assassin, it is a 3-fingered left hand mark, specifically with a scarred palm and really long clawed fingernails.
It's a bloody
it's a bloody handprint
left, but it's only 3 fingers.
The victim, right? 3-fingered left hand. So the interesting thing here is that Eos themselves. So there's the kind of the legend of Eos, and then there is the actual individual, and it's not known whether this individual is still alive or not. And now it's a gang continuing the tradition, mimicking the style. But Eos themselves was the result of an Escher, the Chimera drug, which is what they use to convert Knuckles. So it's an Escher chem specifically that enhances a natural phantom level individual to adapt these more, stealthy techniques and things like that.
Okay.
But what this does, it was basically a chemical transformation gone wrong, which basically turned this guy into a puddle of goo, a sentient pile of goo. But what they are is essentially they became a shapeshifter.
Right.
So they can shrink down to incredibly small spaces, and they're almost gelatinous form, like sneaking through a keyhole or something like that, for example, but then materializing. And how they materialize for the kills specifically is this kind of ghoulish form with 3-fingered claws. But essentially, there's no evidence is ever left behind when this person would.
I like how when you do the 3 fingers, you do it like
the
devil horns, like you're rocking out.
Man.
I always think of like the thumb, index finger, and middle finger.
No, just like that.
Yeah. All right.
Well, the first time reading it through, I was thinking it was missing fingers because that's how they describe it.
That's what I thought.
But I don't. It's not actually missing. It's how their
okay.
claws happening.
Okay.
So either way. Yeah, so there's never any evidence left behind that this kill happened or was associated with Delaque in any way. There's no physical evidence other than that bloody handprint,
which gets attributed to Delaque.
Which is attributed to Delaque. Delaque are happy to accept that attribution, whether it's them or not. It is. But this is essentially this person, EOS. EOS, after performing an assassination, would then go into kind of a state of suspension. They would hibernate essentially in between assignments, and there's kind of this like goo ball shape in between assignments. And then when they were given a job, they would take form and seek out their target, and were ruthlessly efficient at it.
I was about to say, I wonder how they reach out to him to tell them, whether it's a male or female, hey, you've got a mission, but they would just communicate. Yeah.
Psychoterically.
Yeah. That's right. Psychoterically, they'd just be like probably the Star Chamber would just call upon them and say, hey, we have a
wake up, know their target, know the location, go do it.
Yeah. So for me, I chose outside of the gangs of renown or the gangs of legend, I chose this character Calthixis, also known as the Ghost of Primus, and they're a House Delaque bounty hunter.
Yeah.
So, because they take a bounty hunter slot in game terms, you only get a bounty hunter slot, and this fills one of those slots. So, it's taking up a spot. But
they're hired gun. You need to have reputation in order to bring them on board.
Right. So, they are a legendary assassin of Delaque that is said to work for them. The Delaque, of course, don't contradict this rumor.
Never.
Now, as I said, since there's limited information in the House of Legend, I wanted to focus on this kind of enigmatic.
Yes.
This guy, this killer, instead. So originally, assassin for House Delaque, when the Star Chamber began experimenting with chemicals to make the faceless ones, which would eventually become the Noctghoul that you've been talking about. Yeah. Calthixis was one of the first ones to submit themselves. Now they were like a top tier assassin for House Delaque at that point, and they were like, "Yep, sign me up, send me in, coach." And so this made them even a better killer. Like they reached new levels of ability to infiltrate. They were able to change the look of their face so they could look like other people. And so people thought, to this day, they think this character, Calthixis, is still out there killing people. Well, as it turns out, the truth is, as good as an assassin he was, eventually everybody's number kind of comes up. Like, you have bad luck or whatever, and Calthixis was actually killed. When the body was brought back, though, they discovered that Calthixis's face had taken on a life of its own. So it became like this living entity, and the Delaque basically cut the face off the body and preserved it using these, chemicals and things. And now it can be used by exceptional killers. They will put the face on, and it will take over them, pulling memories and talents from the original Calthixis, and then that's the new Calthixis. So it's kind of a Dread Pirate Roberts thing going on.
In game terms too, it's really cool how this character works, in that they have a couple innate skills. There's like 3 or pretty useful skills that this character just comes with, but then they also, like, you get to choose what skills you want. I think you get to add 3 additional skills, and having that many skills is a huge deal in Necromunda. Like, a gang leader has 2, so like this guy's starting with 6, and you get to choose whatever they are from any of the different categories of skills. So
no joke.
You can make a pretty incredible killer.
So he's also known as the Ghost of Primus. So it says in the rules, he counts as a bounty hunter that can only be hired by House Delaque, so nobody else can hire him. And he's subject to the "you get what you pay for," did not alive, claiming bounties, and will get our bit special rules. Now, I don't know what all those special rules
bounty hunter rules.
I figured
for collecting bounties.
But the face of the killer, he has centuries of memories and talent to draw upon, and can dredge up the right skill for the right job when needed, which is what's represented by the...
Which is pretty neat. Like that face, he's so much experience from different kills, or, lifetimes of being worn, alive. That it just has these skills that are, it's a symbiotic relationship with a face, which is crazy.
I thought that was a pretty cool...
it's a good choice.
Pretty cool story.
Good call out.
So, yeah.
Which is interesting that both our Gangs of Legends are like characters that are also kind of larger than life, and there's this whole mythos and mystery behind them.
Again, I think that and again, I'll get in the summary of the book, I'll talk about that, but I think this book is limited in some ways, and the gang is limited in some ways by that. That's not to say it's not interesting. But I think the lore, the models are really good looking too. But you won't. We'll talk about that at the end. But since we're talking about models, let's talk about 2 models. We each picked 1 model here. And normally we would pick a couple models, but again, the range is so limited here that we said, okay, let's just each pick 1 and talk about that model. And so let's start with the one you chose.
So I went with the Nagul, which I've alluded to.
You keep talking about.
I do really like just the lore, the model, the personality of this unit, period. Not only,
it's a good looking unit.
And this to me really just exudes that kind of stealthy ninja assassin killer. There's 2 loadout for it. One has a sword, very classic kind of ninja sword, and the other has 2 claws, which is also very ninja look to it. Just kind of the way it's crouched over, the way it's positioned, it looks brutal, it looks efficient, and I'm here for it. I just love the way they look.
Is that what sold you on the army?
No, so these were actually a later edition. These models did not come out until the new box came out, which was in support of, but I'd already had a huge thriving gang before these models even existed.
I didn't realize that.
But big fan, yeah.
So for me, I chose the, you heard us talk about it earlier, the Spiker. And I kind of threw that out there without explaining it, much like Dan Abnett. That's because I'm going to explain it later.
We'll get there.
So this guy's weird looking. He has a cranium which is super expanded. Huge. He kind of looks like Megamind from from that movie. He's crazy looking. This speaks to me very highly of like Dune and like just that kind of creepy element of 40K that exists. Basically the Spikers are latent psychic talent guys that they pump full of drugs.
These are full-born unsanctioned psychers.
They
fly, they just float everywhere they go.
Because they fill them full of drugs basically to expand their psychic talents. Their heads grow to these massive proportions while the rest of their body atrophies. They can't walk around, so they float around and exude these psychic abilities. And one of the things, and I confirmed this with you earlier because I said in my notes, unless I'm misunderstanding this rule, this guy has the ability to pin a model within 18 inches of him, period. Like they obviously they have to take a will test, right? They have to do a willpower check, but this is a crazy good power because it's sight unseen. It's not line of sight. It's anywhere within 18 inches, and you could be in a place where in Necromunda where there's walls everywhere, and a maze to get to somebody, and somebody's trying to bring some of their most powerful units towards you, and you're just pinning them because you're forcing this test. If you have this guy floating behind your force, like chances are somebody's going to eventually fail a willpower test.
Oh yeah,
and at a key moment.
They I was talking earlier about the Gangs of the Underhive version
such
of
a
this
creepy
model,
looking
which
model.
so I have this model. I have not yet painted mine
Okay.
because I converted one before the actual model existed.
Oh, interesting.
So I've been running that so far. This is on my short list of to do models.
How did you convert a model? Like, what did you do to convert it?
So
do you remember?
I took was it Blackstone Fortress that had the Chaos Cultists,
Yes,
the unsanctioned psychers with big heads and like floating up with the ball and chain.
Yes.
So I took a Delaque trench coat, took a big head from that psyker, the Chaos Psyker, and then the ball and chain as it's floating kind of levitating thing, and I'll throw a picture up.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then he's got like the two fingers like pointing to the cranium, going very psychic there, and then a hand just kind of
it works
like out there, and it worked really well.
Yeah.
In some ways, I actually prefer my conversion to the model, but it's also this one is so fitting for what it is.
Goofy looking, but also creepy looking.
It's like cartoony and stupid and awesome all at the same time. Like
like Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Yes. Yeah.
This is really, really cool. And actually, a clever model in the way that they have kind of the open trench coat holding them up.
Yeah.
It's smart.
The original art for this model, too, is definitely like it's just this giant head and this atrophied body and this weird little cage. Rule wise, they've simplified this unit. It's not as potent as it used to be. It's still pretty good. It's still very useful. It's not very survivable anymore. So it is fragile, which before used to be able to put a flicker field on it. So every time you'd shoot at it, it would just teleport randomly around, which made it really hard to pin down and kill.
Incredibly frustrating.
And the potency of the psychic powers was a bit more, but it's still really
This is
really
still
fun.
good. I mean, anything that avoids line of sight in Necromunda is huge.
Yeah, because your terrain is so much more dense compared to a game of 40K. Like, terrain makes a huge difference.
All right, so let's do this. Let's take a short break. We're going to come back. Then we're going to leap into the next section where we're talking about various gang units and all that. But and then we'll end on giving kind of our full takeaways of the gang and everything associated with it. So we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. We're going to kind of round out our discussion around House Delaque. And one of the things we were saying during the break to each other was, this is kind of hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that's left mystery here intentionally.
Yes.
To increase the mysteriousness of...
And there's no one hard and fast, this is the history.
Right.
It's like, here's 8 things that may or may not be true. And
Could be.
To your point, like part of them are probably true. But one thing we were just talking about is the one of the territories they call it is the deeps.
Yeah.
So this is kind of below everything, below the sumps, below the hive.
Which really, if you look at the hive map, there's the sumps and then there's like the geothermal core that it's pulling from. So it's something down there.
So it's not listed on the map of the hive, and that map's been around forever.
Right.
So this is something Delaque specific. But one thing that it calls out, which is interesting, which is why I'm bringing it up here, is that this is where Delaque go, and this is as close as Delaque will be to the Silent Ones, which is more alluding
that there's something down there.
There is something down there, and they're deep down, so something towards the core of the planet. Maybe the Silent Ones are these giant creatures.
That's where the underwater oceans are.
In the core of the planet.
That's pretty creepy. I keep using that word creepy, but there's nothing else to really describe it. So let's talk about gang units here.
Absolutely.
Josh, because usually we go through and we say, okay, each host will pick, a couple of their favorite gang units. Again, we found ourselves somewhat stymied here by the limited range of models. As I was during the break looking at the color plates of the models and the paint examples that they give, I was saying how much I love the models. Like I absolutely love these models, especially the more bizarre ones. I'm like, I just wish there were more of them. Like I feel like it's a little unsupported. Unsupported is not the right word. It's not as supported as fully as some of the other gangs at this moment.
Which I'd say, to that point, I think Goliath and Escher have the most.
Yeah.
And then Vansar, Delaque, and Orlok are about on par with each other.
Yeah. And so I feel like I may be a little spoiled because I play Goliath.
Right? Goliath, I think, have more than anybody else.
And as I go down this journey, I'm kind of realizing, oh, wait a minute. Okay.
you got all the toys first.
I chose the right gang if I wanted more toys. Yeah. So in some ways, maybe I chose the wrong gang and I should have stuck with the one with fewer toys. So, you know what? Here's what I chose. Again, I delved into the bounty hunter range because there's the box. The box set is great.
Yeah.
Like the generic box set that you buy of Delaque guys is fantastic.
Incredible models.
And you pair that with the Delaque weapons kit.
Yep.
And you're golden. Like
yep.
This stuff is really good looking. I reached into the bounty hunter section and talked about Yagaloth. Yagaloth is the master of whispers. And so, you know, it's interesting. This is all about playing the game, right? And it doesn't make much sense that this unit, again, takes up a bounty hunter slot other than mechanically to say this slot is taken up and it prevents other bounty hunters from being added. One of the cool abilities beyond being a psyker is called Creature of Shadows. And this rule states that attacks without a strength characteristic, so that means things such as like the toxin trait,
yep,
have no effect on Yagaloth.
Web guns, especially, which are one of the most potent weapons in the game. Actually, they do have a strength.
And this is because he's supposed to be somewhat ghost-like. In addition, if he suffers a serious injury result on the injury die, you remove him from the battlefield, and at the end phase, you then place him anywhere on the battlefield within 5 inches of a friendly fighter and at least an inch from an enemy fighter. And it's as if the serious injury did not occur. So
it's hard to take out.
This guy has a really cool backstory. He's basically a non-sanctioned psyker, so it offers your opponent the chance. There's a rule that basically says they can get more coins if they actually take this guy out.
Yeah.
And also, I think it immediately makes you an outlaw if you take him because he's non-sanctioned psyker. The interesting thing, though, is this unit does not have a model.
Yeah.
But I found this amazing representation of him on Reddit by the Reddit user Green and Green. And this really closely matches the picture in the book, which is what drew me to this guy at first. I was talking earlier about the artwork in the book. And I would, like, if I were to try to make this guy, I think I would kit bash some kind of AdMech piece to a Delaque piece.
That cowled hood.
To kind of make him.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he is very cool looking. And he has such an interesting backstory that I want to kind of address here for a second. So, all Delaque have heard the call of the Silent Ones echoing up from the depths of Necromunda, but few have ever journeyed to its source to see what's really down there and returned. We just spoke about this. Even within the Star Chamber, there are doubts that such a feat is even possible, though Yagaloth's very existence would seem to prove that it can be done. He's a living embodiment of the Psychoterica. Yagaloth is a shadow within the Underhive of Hive Primus, arriving suddenly to further the agendas of House Delaque before vanishing just as swiftly. A true master of whispers, such is the power of the Psychoterica contained within Yagaloth, that the agent's half-heard words can break the minds of those who hear them, and the truth is but a fluid construct within the Whisperer's hands, shaped as Yagaloth sees fit. It is said that by manipulating the essence of Psychoterica, he can even transcend his corporeal form, literally becoming nothing more than shadow. So I just,
that's really cool.
He literally has it's one of his special rules is envoy of the Silent Ones. So this like feeds right into what you were just talking about. But he's awesome. I think he's really, really cool.
With the rule update too, just because we're talking about in-game rules now, that guy treating seriously injured as not happening. Seriously injured it was actually a big change in the newest version of the rule.
Oh, is it?
That if you were seriously injured before, you would just stay down and roll again.
Right.
Now you take a flesh wound every time a seriously injured is wounded. So you're just bleeding out now. So like if you roll 3 seriously injured, your toughness 3 guy is dead.
Why do you think they made that change?
I think
it speed up.
It speeds up the game. Most people going down were going to go out anyways.
Yeah.
and it actually helps give experience to models.
Okay.
It actually, in campaign play, it helps feel you get more experienced models to more gangers, which I think
interesting.
I think it enhances or robusts the whole campaign experience a little bit more.
Okay.
Which it's neat. It also incentivizes you to have a friend next to you so you can actually get somebody back up with an assist in game terms.
Yeah.
Because if you have somebody next to you, you roll 2 dice and you get to choose the result.
This guy's amazing if he's just avoiding that.
If he doesn't take that flesh wound, he pops back up next to a friend and he's back in the game. Like, he's really hard to kill.
That's pretty amazing.
You need out of action to take him out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah. As the envoy of the silent ones should be.
Yeah. I mean,
what a cool backstory.
That's rad. Yeah. And yeah, just being able to kind of meld into shadows and actually just the physical essence disappears and he becomes the psychoteric.
It's so creepy.
And traverses to wherever is needed, which I think is really well represented in the rules there of just being able to pop back up next to a friend.
For sure.
Where the psychic choir is going to be loudest.
That's right.
That's neat. So I went with the not cool, sounding like a broken record here.
Listen, you've always talked about these guys, even not during this episode, but just like whenever you talk about this army, these are the guys you talk about.
They were super fun. In game terms, they have a built-in infiltration, so they don't need infiltration as a skill. Just like turn 2 of a game, they get to pop up, and they're a little bit more efficient about it. I think they only have to be 3 or 6 inches away, so their bubble isn't that big.
Okay.
So they can get into that charge range like turn 2. They're doing their thing, and these guys are absolute combat monsters. If you're doing the Claude guy, they get the paired weapon ability, which gives you, I think it doubles your attacks, and then you're adding on top of that for charging. So something like they're getting like 6 attacks on a charge. In Necromunda, that's really good. And they are high strength, high quality, very likely to just murder whatever they see. And this pairs really well with Delaque, with some of their tactics cards, which I alluded to before, and that if they pop up, they're out of position. You don't get the initiative for that turn. So they're like, you have to set them up on the second turn before you know if you have priority or not.
I see.
But you can then, with Delaque and their shenanigans, which is very fitting to the lore and all the mystery that we've alluded to, there's a lot of tactics cards that Delaque have, like friend or foe. Like, as far as you're concerned, this guy is part of your gang, and you can't shoot him until he attacks you. So if I save that activation till towards the end of a turn, like, he might be out in the open and I don't have initiative, but you can't do anything about it except for move away, because you as a player know this. But
and this is supposed to represent like his ability to infiltrate, look
meld
like,
in, and just part of that essence. So they're just really cool models, really cool rules. I just love. So Delaque, again, historically being a very shooty army, like this brought a really cool melee component,
close combat
to that, which is super fun. Like I love melee, but and this was a close call. This is also a neat unit in that you can pay a couple extra points to give them the Psychoteric Whisper, so you can make a psychic version of this up close mystery shadow ninja assassin.
Well, like one of the things we touched on during our coverage of Goliath was the fact that they can take all these drug enhancements and this kind of thing. This is their version of the drug enhancements. It's the psychoteric abilities.
Psychoteric Whispers, unlocking that and then choosing between one of those 3 categories is exactly that. It's the special sauce of Delaque that makes them unique. They have their weapons, they have their loadouts, they have their skills and skill trees. The Delaque do have their own unique skill set called Obfuscation, so they can also, in addition to any of the regular skills that you can choose between primaries and secondary skills, Obfuscation in campaign terms is actually really cool. It does a lot towards campaign play of making these guys more useful for actions and things like that they're doing.
Interesting.
More survivable. It's super thematic and great for campaigns. In a skirmish thing, they're less good for one-off games, but Necromunda is really designed for campaign play.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anyways, I just really love what this model brought to the army in the new evolution of it and the options for it. So having multiple choices on how you want to load it out. You want to get up close. You want to pair it with this tactic card that you have, and just get up close and make some murder happen. And then you can really just fun options with psychic powers to unlock and kind of add to that repertoire of what they can do. Yeah.
So talk a little bit, Josh, since you play this game.
Yeah.
And I don't. Can you talk to me a little bit about how do you think about the tactics and abilities when you play this game? How does this game play during a Necromunda campaign?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you talked about how they used to be shooty, but now you have these close combat options. Where do they sit now?
They're still fairly synergistic in that you want to have. You're getting the most power out of the gang, out of their leaders and champions. So these are phantoms and not ghouls for the champions, and then your Master of Shadow is your gang leader. You can go psychic or not with that. The in-book powers are very thematic, not super powerful if you're going for more of a competitive angle. The Book of the Outcast did unlock an ability for basically any psychic unit to choose their psychic powers from the Book of Outcast, which are way more offensive oriented powers versus the thematic shadowy, madness, delusion.
So you're not just limited to the psychic powers in here.
No.
I didn't realize Book of Outcasts opened that up.
So, and Delaque actually having the most readily access to psychic models just in the game period.
Yeah.
That if you wanted to make a very I guess there is actually, you can do a pure outcast gang that is every model is psychic, and they're outcasts, they're crazy, and they're super powerful, but they're going to blow their own heads up, which is fun too. No surprise, I'm actually working on that game. So you have a lot of options with this gang in that you can take the innate powers. There's one of the units and models we didn't talk about is I'm blanking on the name right now. It's a psychic thrall basically. Psygeist, that's the unit. And it's basically a ganger that has a more potent version of Psychoteric Whispers. They actually have Psychoteric Mastery, so they have more range. They have more potency in what they can do, more access to powers. And then there's also these little worms that are that the Delaque can use. They're kind of this weird mechanical organic hybrid of psychic worms. That they send out, and they can actually use these as relay points. So if you have a psychic character casting, you can cast the power from the worm instead of yourself. So you can get line of sight, you can get range from.
And these are the modeled. These are the mechanical looking type worms. They're fairly long. I mean, they'd be 8 feet. 6 feet long worm.
In real terms. Yeah, they would be. At least, yes.
I just want to give an impression of them that when you say worms, you're not just talking about
No, yeah. So the Psygeist model actually is holding one of them.
Yeah.
And that one's, in game terms, 4 feet.
Yeah.
In scale to the model. But then there's the individual ones that are actually modeled as popping out of the ground. So you're really just seeing the head. But those things are huge. So they would maybe be a 15-foot worm.
Wow.
So this giant mechanical organic hybrid worm that's exuding kind of psychic energies. It's really cool. This gang definitely has a really unique mix on there. So it is a shooty gang, it is melee gang, and it's a psychic gang. The Paisky Inspector, which we mentioned in the lore-wise of being that the Xenos Bring that comes to the Delaque to kind of get an upgrade, give me that mechanical body. Those guys they're melee monsters. They're really good in combat also. They're also psychers. So they get to cast powers, and they're really fun. They fly around, so they're pretty fast. They're very durable because it's this giant mechanical construct around a brain. Yeah. Just neat models. One of my favorite models. Definitely a shout out for that one. So this gang has a lot of things. It's got melee, it's got shooting, and it's got psychics, and then it has that additional layer of just kind of tactics cards shenanigans.
Okay.
And those are almost all designed to keep you alive or have almost a little gotcha moment to your opponent in order to you were going to do this. Well, no, you're not. They're really fun to play because there's so many options and so many ways you can take it. They have potential to be a little frustrating to play against because
of that shenanigans.
Because of the shenanigan element.
Anything that's kind of you thought you were going to do this, no, you're not.
Yeah.
It can give you a feel bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And
which is typically how I feel when I play you. Yeah. In anything.
I'm not a gotcha feel bad guy all the time.
I just feel bad all the time because I'm losing.
They are a little bit more complex to play, as we talked about earlier,
yeah.
and that really comes to life here, especially if you're taking that extra level of using the outcast psychic powers and things like that, which make them very potent psychers.
Yeah.
But
one of the things that it talks about in the book as well that I found very fascinating was they talked about using alliances. And
yes,
there's a designer note in it that alliances are an optional, secondary rules that allow you to bring in basically other groups in the Underhive.
And all houses have access to these various alliances, which we didn't talk about much in the Goliath book.
No, but
I guess we did with the slavers.
Yes, but we didn't talk about the anyway, there's another group there that we didn't talk about, but for House Delaque in particular, they talk about here the allies that House Delaque has, and one that really stuck with me was the Psi Syndica, which are basically trafficking in psionicis, like psychers that they say that one of the few. There's no greater crime than the concealment or trafficking of psychers. This does not stop recidivists from dealing in these powerful individuals. And so what you have is unsanctioned psychers here, that have banded together that are allies. In particular, House Tai is a very interesting house here that Delaque has allied with. Now, unfortunately,
they don't have models.
They don't have any models for some of these guys because these guys, the art here is amazing, and there's the one color plate in here of the leader of House Tai that I was like, that is an amazing looking.
She's incredible.
This is amazing picture.
So I've been tempted to use some Sisters of Silence from the 30K range as a base jumping off point of doing some conversion work for those.
I could see it.
Because they're amazing models,
conceptually,
cool concept, conceptually incredible. And I think I can hopefully do it justice.
So that's interesting because I was going to ask, had you used any allies in anything you've done with Delaque so far? Or no,
I have not, because I haven't modeled anything at this point. But next campaign that we run, I would love to delve deeper into allies for everybody's houses, because all the House of books are out now. So you got options for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, that was just interesting. I found this to be one of the most interesting sections of the book as well.
Yeah, it's really
were the allies. It really just expanded upon what. You feel like, oh, I'm just getting this gang, but then you're like, oh, but you can add these other three potential things to it.
It adds a whole extra layer of the gang. Again, better for campaign play. Like if you're going to deal with houses, you can actually call favors from the houses, things like that. You can get units from the houses. It does expand. Not a lot of units in any of the House of books actual have models for those units, but still a really cool layer to add to that.
So normally too, we'd go into Black Library support of this kind of thing at the moment, and Forge World support. There's very limited Forge World support here.
I found one Black Library book called Fleshworks, which is really a spy novel. I have not read it. I'm curious to read it now.
Yeah.
But it's really dealing with kind of the spy espionage aspect of it. And just the quick synopsis of it is basically they're trying to transport the bionics from somebody from one place to another, but the owner of the bionics is not deceased.
Okay.
So I don't know how they interact with that. Like they're getting messages from this, or the person seeing what their bionic eyes are seeing, or anyway, it sounds fascinating and very Delaque at the same time.
It would seem to me this would be very hard to write a book from the viewpoint of a Delaque,
which I don't think
person
this is.
I can't imagine how you would. It'd be like writing a novel from the perspective of the Tyranids.
Right, yeah.
In a way, it's like, how do you
feed?
Yeah, how do you really, do that? I don't think that it's probably not quite that extreme, but it is pretty extreme. I mean, and how would you do that without revealing things that wouldn't want to, or haven't been decided, you know? Yeah. A lot of times this kind of thing is written and nobody at GW knows the answer either.
Right.
The two missing Primarchs, and nobody knows.
And they're intentionally leaving those vague for you to fill in the blank.
Or just to be mysterious.
Or just keep the mystery there.
Yeah. Or to keep people arguing on the internet.
Yeah. That's never going away, even if they answered the question.
It would have ended, but GW just kept pumping out stuff about Alpha Legion and...
The Cabal.
Yeah. So, for Forge World support, you really have the Spiker, which we talked about.
Yep.
And then you have the Delaque weapon sets.
A couple weapon sets and a head upgrade.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it so far.
That's it for Forge World. One thing worth calling out here is that there is no bespoke Ashways support for this yet. There is, I think it was a Warhammer community article that released rules for at least the pilots, the vehicle pilots.
Oh, interesting.
So you can put Delaque in vehicles, but you're only using the generic or build your own vehicles. Like
they don't have like a specific.
Like Goliath has their chainsaw motorcycle. Yes. Escher has the jet bikes essentially. Kaudar has the walkers. They're like fancy legs. And Orlok have the buggies. Vansar don't have anything yet either.
Right.
So that will likely be coming.
It's going to be interesting to see what would Delaque do outside of the hive.
That's a good question.
They get sunburned real bad.
Yeah. They only come out at night.
What if they are the Ashways nomads?
They could. Well, I think the gang already answered that question. I think that mystery's been solved.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. The gang that you were allegedly painting.
Hey, shut up.
Yeah. No, I'll have to reread the Ashways book and see why are Delaque out there.
Why would they be out there?
But I'll be curious to see if
a lot of sunblock.
I'm hoping the next Cinderak book that they come out with, which has slowly been expanding the lore and adding vehicles for gangs outside in Ashways, will have both Vansar and Delaque.
That would be really cool.
I'm hopeful.
That would be really cool.
And that's part of the reason I've been holding off on running a Ashways campaign is until everybody has those at least bespoke gang vehicles out there, because it really changes how you play.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So listen, why is this gang fun and what makes it unique? And I'm going to let you have the last word here because you're really the expert. But based on everything I've been reading, and I've played against you in various games, lost against you in various games. So people who are heavily into the lore, like myself, this is a particularly creepy faction.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, in fact, this may be the most quote unquote alien of the factions out there. And I even consider saying that when I consider Genestealer Cult, because it's just so eldritchly alien and creepy. Like
Couldn't agree more.
There are things going on here. Every other gang is kind of grounded in reality. And then you have these guys that are like, one guy can turn into shadows and the other guy's turning into a gelatinous cube squeezing through keyholes. It's like, what is going on with these creepy guys? And so it really does kind of elevate things and take it to another level. There's a lot of weirdness happening here to wrap your head around. Much like Zechi and stuff, there's plots within plots, and things are always turning out, how they expect. What are their main objectives and what are their secondary objectives? Who knows?
They're playing a long game. Who knows what the end result of that is, but they're playing a long game.
So if you have fun living in that type of ambiguity, then this is the army or the gang, I should say, for you. Like it's creepy, it's different. It kind of breaks the mold.
Yeah.
For how for its place within the Necromunda universe.
In both lore and playstyle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's where this gang could be really fun for somebody. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, for me, it's the lore and the aesthetics were always the first thing that appealed to me. I mean, even back in '95 when it first came out, like just that aesthetic of trench coat spy guys running around, like that was cool. And then the lore and the evolution of the lore has been really neat, and just the gameplay, the variety of options that I was talking about. You've got shooting options, you've got melee options, you've got psychic options, you got that layer of shenanigans with the tactics cards that enhance all of those aspects. The fact that they find their own way to solve all the problems in game terms too, like using flechette pistols or web guns and gauntlets and things like that.
Yeah,
that helps mitigate. Like individually, none of the models are very powerful. I say probably the Paisky Inspector is probably the most powerful unit in the game.
Okay, and
that's a brute, so it's not your standard.
In the entire game or in this gang?
In the gang.
Okay,
yeah, and maybe in the game too. They're up there. Yeah,
okay.
Like they could take on an Ambot, and that would be a pretty fair fight.
All right,
but they are brutes, so they're not a core ganger, but they have that option, and they are a Delaque specific thing. Again, it being just this fast flying monster that hits really hard, and it's also a psyker.
Yeah,
It's just it's a really cool thing, and I love the way that this gang brings its lore to life on the tabletop. And we found this going through the House of Chains book also. I think Goliath also did a really good job of representing their lore on the tabletop.
Without a doubt.
And I think they've also Delaque very true to that. Like,
yeah.
Which is one of the things I love about Necromunda. The game itself tells a story even if you're not trying. Like, you can't help but have a story developed from between the lore, the models, and just how it actually plays out on the tabletop. Like,
so if you like playing fish brains locked in a cybernetic tentacled.
Yep. It's amazing.
Then this is the gang for you. All right. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to close out the show.
Yeah.
All right. And we're back, and we got a few final thoughts we're going to throw out there, and then closing messages, and then we'll call it that. So, again, I'll let you have the final say here, but I think this is a really thematically cool gang. I talked about that earlier from Necromunda. I think it occupies a unique space within it.
Yeah,
I can see again why you and why Justin are attracted to this. Justin loves that kind of creepy stuff, especially from whether it's movies or whatever. But like, he likes Dark Eldar as a force, and every time he talks about that, he likes the homunculi. He likes all the creepy stuff.
Yeah.
So this kind of fits well within that piece. I am a bit disappointed in the limited support of the gang from Forge World and GW. I mean, we talked about that too, how they're kind of supported along the same lines as 3 others, but I think even there, they're kind of missing out. And I think fitting them into Ash Waste might be complex, like to figure out why they would be out there. I'm hoping to see increases in that soon, because the art in the books,
incredible.
It just blew me away. Yeah. I mean, the first black and white picture, I was just like, oh, that guy looks so much cooler than the one in the Gangs of the Underhive. Like, it's just, whoever that artist is killing it.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see, more Hanger on and Allies models come out, because there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think I'd love to see that stuff on the table. Absolutely love it. Like, as much as you talked about the shenanigans and that kind of thing, and kind of giving feel bad sometimes, like, I'll put up with that to play against them. I think they should make you feel bad.
Well, yeah,
they're creepy.
Thematically, they're the assassins popping out of the shadows, and
that's got to be frustrating.
It sucks to be on the other end of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I hate to say it, but
for sure.
Yeah.
But if I land a punch,
you'll kill him.
Yeah. All right. What about you? Any final thoughts there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, really reiterating everything that you've said, plus what I said, just with the options of synergy. I absolutely hear what you're saying with the limited models. The models that do exist are incredible. Like, even your base ganger, like, I can't
they
emphasize
really
how
are.
much, like, I just love your basic Delaque ghost in a trench coat, and everything above and below that.
Yeah.
Really cool. One thing I'll say with that is that to my Delaque Spiker, for example, like the conversion that I did, that was a lot of fun for me to bring to life. I'm also, like, I've been a lifelong converter, so really enjoy that modeling aspect. And House Tie, like, I'm going to make some of those models come to life. Yeah. So while there's not direct model support, there is a lot of art that influences that, and the rules are there. Point. So I'm happy. I mean, this is a specialist game, and it's a skirmish game. So I have 25 Delaque models, and that's
that's all you need.
That's a way more.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point there. I mean, I'm looking at it as a negative, and there is some positive to that, which it allows you to open up your creativity vault and begin to, kit bash and put things together in ways that people hadn't done before.
And I will very happily continue to expand this gang a few models at a time, because I'm really, with 25 models, I've got pretty much everything I'm ever going to need for it.
Yeah.
But so I have those options if I want to do a deep dive and do a character or two, whether it's a bounty hunter or a house tie agent or something like that. I can easily find source those bits and convert, use a little green stuff, paint a couple triangles, and it's done. So
oh God, I hate you and Bryce so much.
Cool. It's my happy place for Necromunda. I do have other gangs also, but they're definitely my first and foremost.
Okay, so I mean, that is one of the things. I mean, we talked about what was the other book you talked about where you can pull the psyker abilities from?
Book of the Outcast.
Book of the Outcast.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, going back to my statement at the beginning of the game, you know, is Necromunda cheap? Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, you're going to spend some money to play it. Don't fall for the it's cheaper than this. It like any of these games,
it depends
it's what you put into
on your group and your gang and how you want to play it.
Yeah.
You could play Necromunda for $80 and be done.
And be done.
Yeah.
But realistically, you're not going to.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You're not going to. But yeah, I mean, it's a great system.
Yeah.
Great system. Super fun. All right. So with that out of the way, you know, leave us reviews on iTunes. That's cool. Blah, blah, blah. What we'd like more than that, more than anything right now, if you could please, even if you aren't watching this on YouTube, if you could go to our YouTube channel, there's a link on our webpage. There's a link in the Facebook group. If you could go to our YouTube channel and please just subscribe to that, we would super appreciate that. It helps us get the word out, but also helps us, you know, move forward with the show and those kinds of things. So we were just discussing today about what extra content we're going to put on there.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more content coming out that's outside of the full show format. But also, if you do find yourself with time, you're sitting down to paint something and you just want the visual, all the things we're alluding to, talking about models in this episode, for example, or the art, just take a quick glance up on YouTube and you'll
and next up very soon, we're going to be doing some live streaming hobby time where we're just hanging out, hobbying and chatting with people. And we'll probably do the first of those kind of unannounced and spring them on you, but you'll be able to go to the YouTube channel and see them later. But then we'll probably get to a point where we're announcing them in advance and arranging for that so that
we'll actually have some moderation there. So while we're hobbying, you can chat with us and
And additionally, you know, we may learn things from guys such as Josh or you know, you talked about doing the oil wash and Steve was immediately like, can I come over and watch that too? I'm like, sure, you know, that'd be fine. You know, Justin is an incredible painter and airbrusher. He'll probably partake in some of those as well. If we get Jody's a fantastic painter as well. You know, you know, we'll talk about various techniques, or we'll just sit around and BS about, you know,
just hang out.
Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Yeah. Talk nerd and nerd adjacent.
If you haven't heard me talk about Dungeon Crawler Carl yet, check it out on Audible.
Check it out.
All right.
It's worth it.
I'm trying to get the author of this book series to do an interview with, even though it's kind of outside of our realm. It's just so fun. I want to
have that conversation if nothing else.
I have a bi-weekly conversation with John French and Ed Brown where we sit down and we chat about stuff. And literally the last two calls that we've had have been nothing but Dungeon Crawler Carl talk. So yeah, when I told John I was trying to get an interview with the author, he's like, I'd join that interview if you'd let me. So pretty cool. You know, we have a great Facebook group. As you heard earlier, we're pulling some artists from there, helping out with Tablewood charities, but also we're calling out our
Elite Choices.
Elite Choice. Show of Force was stuck in my head. Elite Choices from there. We've got some ideas on things we're going to do there as well, because, you know, our main mantra here is making you feel like a part of our hobby group and our gaming group. And so that's one of the ways we absolutely do it. If you are not a Facebook user, okay, you know, I'm sorry. that Facebook group is kind of the core of where we're discussing things.
There is a Discord in Pitted Characters Discord server. If you're not on Facebook, you can also participate there. There is a hobby channel. There's a channel for everything that is relevant to the show.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is an excellent point. And I'm trying to be a little more active on that Discord group. My kid uses Discord for talking all the time too. So, you know, I'm trying to be on there more. There's only so much time I have in the day, though, and so many platforms. It's crazy. But I am more active in the podcast section of the Discord, as well as the Patreon section of the Discord.
And you'll find me in both those spots, as well as Specialist Games quite a bit. I
noticed you're on
where
there
my heart lurks in the shadows.
Jeff hangs out in our Discord quite a bit.
It's actually I probably talk to Jeff the most these days, which is fun.
So. Okay, so please check out our YouTube channel. We'd love to see you there, and we'd love for any feedback you guys have. So, I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap it up. So until next time, this is Carl.
This is Josh.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where this is too creepy for me.
And what is truth but another lie we tell ourselves to keep from going mad?
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in episode 224. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.